Number 8. Wow, I don't know how this happened, but I'm so glad it happened. And just in case this is your first time here, let me go ahead and throw some names on the screen while I explain what's going on. This is a ranking of 100 songs, 75 of which were voted in by viewers like you. On top of that, 8 songs were given to me by my $15 patrons, and I filled in the remaining 17 by handpicking suggestions at my own discretion. Exciting stuff. And apparently, I'm just physically unable to keep anything short and concise anymore, so let's just jump right in. First, as always, the bad stuff.
I love when she take control.
She beat my meat whack-a-mole.
Yeah, at this point, you should not be surprised. Yeah, I don't know how much clearer I have to make that this style of comedy music is not for me. Like, maybe there are exceptions, but I sure can't think of any. Anyway, y'all saw where I put that epic rap battle song. You have no one to blame but yourself for thinking that this would be any different. Okay, but let's handle this in a slightly nicer way.
She asked me, what's your favorite position? It's the one where I lay back and you do the mission.
I guess it's worth noting that I have absolutely no feelings towards Smosh, sentimental or otherwise. I didn't even know who these guys were before this video. In any case, this mostly reminds me of the work of the Lonely Island, but where that group has a pretty tried and true shtick of taking a mundane situation and blowing it up to absurd proportions, the gist of this song is memes and sex.
Driving to the crib like Guy Fieri. She's sponging on my bob until I'm ready.
And good lord, is meme humor just not my type of comedy. Certainly not one for which I need a whole song. And this song is chock full of so many unpleasant references for which I could only assume are targeted toward the teenage boys who find this funny. Sex is funny, sure, but not like this. Likewise, I am not a teenage boy, so there you go. To top it all off, this beat just genuinely sucks so bad, it's actively nauseating to listen to. I just have no need for this whatsoever. And to be clear, I'm not actually angry about the song being here. I'm just glad that I finally escaped the era where I need to care about this one. I am free, and we can all move on. I should acknowledge something before we continue, because I feel like y'all might be a bit confused. Yeah, that last song, that was no typo. That is indeed my number 99, not my 100. That's because I have plans for my number 100, which will come later, so let's go ahead and put a pin in that for now. Anyway, yeah, the 2 songs by YouTubers right at the bottom. Oops.
My head's on the ground again. I'm bleeding on the sand, but I don't feel it.
Yeah, by virtue of this being a YouTuber song, I already knew this wasn't going to be up to my speed. Still, I did give this one a fair chance, as its themes about mental health struggles are certainly commendable.
Scorch the sun, I'm burning. Freezing nights, I'm learning.
It's more or less an ultra-dramatic display of such, as our speaker powers through the metaphorical desert of their struggle and refuses the help of others because of the pride that comes with solitude. A pride that only eats them up and leads them further on this downward spiral.
No one can hurt me if I'm walking all alone.
And it's such an earnest display of these anxieties and stresses that I ultimately can't help but admire it a little bit. But, well, like I said, this just isn't for me. This style alone is already an uphill battle, and there simply isn't a ton of dynamic form or variety to this spare piano-driven instrumental to justify its nearly 8-minute length. Yeah, it's a long one.
If I'd known that it would be this way, I would have never put myself this far into the fray. 'Cause now I'm seeing.
Likewise, the singer sure is trying, with moments of genuinely raw pain coming through now and again. Other times though, yeah, this just doesn't connect, sorry. It's clear that the song means a lot to the artist, but being totally honest, I just can't get a ton from this myself. I keep coming back to this word detached to describe how I feel about Sahara, and well, yeah, that's just something I can't really help. It's not bad, just, well, not my thing, that's all.
That's rather nice. Oil and grime, poison slime.
Alright, so the tricky thing about suggesting to me songs from pre-existing media is that it assumes that I am already intimately familiar with the source material. Hellfire got a solid ranking from me last time because, well, Hunchback is one of my favorite animated films, and I love the song. On the other hand, well, you can push to me music from Donkey Kong Country all you want, but the truth is, I have never played Donkey Kong Country, so I could only ever critique it from an outsider's view. This is all to say, I have not seen Ferngully in at least 2 decades, so this was already a shot in the dark.
I see the world and all the creatures in it.
Important to note though, is that this is primarily just Tim Curry doing his Tim Curry thing, strutting about in his swanky performance that feels only marginally appropriate for a kid's film.
To slice a path of doom with my sweet breath to guide it.
It's a pretty neat bluesy type of villain song, some nice horns and synth embellishments for sure. But outside of the camp aspect of Tim Curry, there aren't a ton of hooks or selling points to grasp onto. Pretty fun, but I've seen way better villain songs for this to ring at all exceptional, so yeah, let's move on. Skrillex is not for me, y'all. Again, so much of this kind of EDM is a hard sell, and that includes dubstep. I did rank a Skrillex song pretty highly in the past, but that was pretty much the antithesis of dubstep, with its softer edges and firm central melody line. This one is very much dependent on the glitches and choppy percussive elements of its atmosphere, including that sample, which works more as additional percussion than anything else. What I can say is that this doesn't annoy me nearly as much as some of the rougher, more chaotic side of Skrillex's catalog. Relatively speaking, it's pretty toned down and poppier than the others. Overall though, I am sorry. I see the appeal, but it's just not completely for me. My first time listening to the song, I ranked it near the center. Each subsequent listen, it dropped more and more. And now we're here. Oops.
It's not fair.
Alright, The Porter. I know I've reviewed his songs in past subscriber specials, most of them quite favorably, but I don't know. There's something about this particular album rollout that I just didn't vibe with. Cheerleader alone could have been a solid tune. The upbeat direction is certainly interesting, if nothing else. Nonetheless, man am I just not a fan of this loud blown out production, not helping this relatively limp and emotionless direction. Musician or sea of voices, this is not.
I love the time that makes you dedicate your life.
The lyrics are really where it loses me though. Cheerleader constantly flip-flops between expressing a soft criticism over the parasociality of fan culture and giving a genuine message of love to his own devoted fanbase. While I think it is possible to navigate these themes with nuance while acknowledging their complexities, it doesn't feel like the song is all that interested in having these conversations. Rather, it simply skirts along this premise, and with Robinson sounding so detached from the topic, it's really hard for me to care all too much. Glad this one resonates for a lot of folks, I'm just not one of them. I mean, I like it when things are easy for me, but also, why? Here we've got a pretty standard pop hit from 2 mainstream pop artists that has been mostly forgotten because, well, it's mostly forgettable. This feels like a big outlier of this list, which is saying something considering the kind of songs we have coming up later. Alright, so is this some of the most tolerable Marshmello production I've heard? Absolutely. Can I also say that's a pretty solid tune with a mildly empowering message at its center? Yep. But it's also not a whole lot beyond that. It's a type of song that my Passable Tier was made for. Songs that flow smoothly through one ear and out the other with no discernible complaint, but also not a whole lot to chew on. Generally speaking, I prefer the chewier stuff, so let's go ahead and move along to some of those now. Sometime between Liz Phair's breakthrough as a 90s lo-fi darling and her notorious Penis Colada era, we got this song, her only notable pop hit. And And, well, yeah, this is incredibly wholesome. I associate this mostly for its music video getting a ton of play on VH1, a pleasant slice of adult alternative to slot in between Soak Up the Sun by Sheryl Crow and Calling All Angels by Train. No melody line ever swells too high, no beat ever hits too hard, and it all lies in that sweet, digestible middle ground, and as such, I don't have too much to say about it either. I do appreciate that, for as momcore as it is, she still has some room to throw in a bit of punkish vulgarity into the mix. Otherwise, yeah, cute, sure. Hello again, Annie Lennox of Eurythmics. Alright, as an appreciator of that early 90s adult alternative sound, this Baroque pop take on the genre is pretty darn cool. It's like a Kate Bush song for the brunch crowd, or something. That piano line alone is all kinds of delightful, a great backbone to the track. Although it is a bit funny to have an instrumental this bright and happy paired with lyrics about anguished heartbreak and desperation for the speaker's ex-lover to return. She just comes off as so transparently in denial of the relationship's end. I almost want to physically shake her out of her foolishness. Granted, Lennox does sell it pretty well, as her voice is properly good and powerful, and the tune does get stuck in my head from time to time. Yeah, sure, it's decent. No more, no less. After this video is done, I'll have reviewed 800 songs for subscriber specials. I'm so glad this one is one of them.
It's a new day, but it all feels old. It's a good life, that's what I'm told.
To be clear, yeah, I get it. Good Charlotte are kinda lame, aren't they? Likely one of the big examples of 2000s pop punk fully sterilizing and commodifying itself for mass consumption. I basically agree with all the critics, yeah. But I mean, sometimes they do get it right, if only by accident.
And I don't ever wanna be you. Don't wanna be
The anthem is hands down their strongest track. It's one of their scant few songs that actually holds up with the passing of time, and I don't think my nostalgia goggles are coloring my judgment. I mean, sure, it was certainly intended to speak to the hearts and minds of their teen audience, absolutely jaded by the stagnant life paths set up by their parents and teachers.
Do you really wanna be like them? Do you really wanna be another trend?
But, well, what about those of us no longer in high school, who continue to have the pressures of the real world breathing down our necks well into adulthood? I say we can always use another loser anthem, speaking as a proud loser myself. Are we hearing the sentiment from potentially the whiniest, most musically inept members of the scene? Well, yeah, sure. But it's still a solid tune with its heart in the right place, and that has to count for something, I think. Okay, we've been playing the sandbox for a bit too long. Now it's time for some real art. Oh yeah, it's happening.
She was more like a beauty queen from a movie scene. I sent on my
Oh yes, this is exactly what it sounds like. I've honestly known of this cover for about a decade now. It's a track I love showing to friends as a joke, which is why it was requested for me here. This song is from 2009, but I can't quite figure out if it was recorded as a Michael Jackson tribute in the wake of his death, or if it's just unfortunate timing. But that hardly matters anyway. All you really need to know is what you can hear.
people all around me. Be careful what you do. Don't go around breaking your girl's heart.
It's a Billie Jean cover by a Mexican cumbia band, sung by a dude who absolutely cannot hit these notes, but my god does he try.
She's just a girl who claims I am the one that the kiss.
And boy is it strangely endearing. The cultural relevance is there, and I sure do love my Mexican party jams. But also, it's a cover that was clearly made for the sheer fun of it. As if the band members had this idea for a silly prank and recorded it to send to friends and family as an inside joke. It's an awkward novelty song, but not as bad as it is just delightful. Maybe we didn't need a Billie Jean cover like this, but we sure do have it now, and anytime I want to give it a re-listen or send it to friends for the chuckles, it'll always be there. And I don't know, that's just cute. Dudes rock, y'all. Okay, this next one actually has a pretty cool backstory, so hang tight.
Well, there's many a strange impulse out on the plains of West Texas.
Cowboys Are Frequently Secretly Fond of Each Other was originally written and recorded by country music Ned Sublette during the early 80s urban cowboy scene, and thus the song built up an underground popularity as the gay cowboy song in these circles. While Sublette himself is not gay, his lyrics nonetheless spoke on the realities of queer cowboys looking for love, while also lampooning the hypocrisies of internalized homophobia and toxic masculinity.
But the ones who brag loudest are the ones who are most likely queer.
Throughout the years, it was discovered by a number of musicians both inside and outside of the country scenes, covered by such distinct artists such as 90s queercore band Pansy Division.
What did you think those saddles and boots was about?
Eventually, it ended up in the hands of one Willie Nelson, who, motivated by the popularity of the film Brokeback Mountain, as well as a recent coming out of a friend, covered it himself, this version likely being the most well-known recording. Until now, that is.
And inside every cowboy, there's a lady that loves to slip out.
Orville Peck's most recent album features a number of collaborative covers, including this one, featuring Willie Nelson. At this point, the image of the gay cowboy has become as synonymous with Western culture as John Wayne himself, and this particular cover is notable for Peck being an actual queer cowboy. And judging by the fact that the lyrics have remained pretty unchanged across all these versions, it goes to show just how its themes have remained strikingly relevant through the decades.
But when you talk to a cowboy, don't treat him like he was a sister.
And as far as this cover is concerned, well, it's nice. I'll admit that there is a peculiar air of novelty here, despite no notable joke being told, which might just be the antiquated 80s humor rearing its head. I've certainly preferred many other tunes from both musicians, but Peck has a great voice, and it's also just so nice to hear Willie still kicking it at his age. To wrap this up, I'm so glad I was able to use this section to tell the song's storied history to y'all. Queer folks have always been around, laughing, crying, and telling their stories to all who will listen. Solidarity forever. Yee-haw. Maybe this next one is familiar to y'all? I don't know. This song is more or less primed to be a hit, and it wouldn't surprise me if that happened eventually, but here's my take on it now. This is just vibes in song form. Soulful 70s sunshine vibes, to be clear, which there are certainly worse things. So I get a song like this submitted every so often, one where I can't discern anything about it I particularly dislike, but it also feels very much like empty calories. Though less like a bag of potato chips and more like a freshly baked brownie. Something that just plain feels so good to listen to, but leaves little to chew on otherwise. It's clearly going for that retro soul feel, and in that regard, it totally wins. The groove is pleasant, instrumentals are warm and fuzzy, and the vocals are just magical. I do struggle to see it as much more than any other sparkly pop song. It's quite good in the moments, but then you move on. I'm not one to turn down a warm brownie though, so yeah, fun.
Let them know what goes
on. Rolling stones of the rap game, not bragging. Lips bigger than Jagger, not sagging.
Lately, I've realized that I have a big soft spot for songs like these, later period tracks from legends in their field, who know that this might very well be the last time they can bring a career-defining anthem to the world, so they give it all they got. Harder Than You Think is a prime example of this.
Screaming gangster 20 years later. Of course it does while consciousness faded. New generations believe it.
I really dig the sampling here, those absolutely fiery horns bringing about this potent air of triumph and resilience. And Chuck D echoes this sentiment through the motivational lyrics he spits, and sounds pretty good as he does so. Though, I gotta be honest, Flava Flav isn't my favorite here.
Yeah, that's right. We're Public Enemy #1 in New York. Public Enemy #1 in Philly. Public Enemy.
I know he comes with the Public Enemy territory, but he mostly plays a second fiddle hype man to Chuck's ringleader swagger, and he's just sounded better in general. I can't say that this is among my favorite Public Enemy tunes, as it relies a bit too hard a repetition for my liking, while also not being quite as hard-hitting as I'm used to hearing from them. But again, that sample carries this, and I'm always gonna love that about it at least.
Likes me more. All I did was try my best. It's the kind of things I did unrelentlessly.
While all the big pop hits from Sour were making all the waves back in 2021, I was also looking at the deep cuts. Well, deep cut. This deep cut. It even made my honorable mentions back then.
I feel like no one wants me.
And I hate the way I'm perceived. I only have 2 real friends.
And it's kind of cute that I've received this one after reviewing Ballad of a Homeschooled Girl last time. In a way, that song was just a continuation of what Rodrigo has started in Brutal, namely her testimonial to the misery of young adulthood. I noted this as a callback to 90s riot girl punk way back when, and yeah, the attitude is all here, even if the goalposts have been moved ever so slightly. Rodrigo's lyrics are blunt and pointed, not without a ton of depth, but immediacy is the name of the game here, and she plays it well. But I gotta be real, it's all about that guitar riff.
God, it's brutal out here.
It's just so catchy, gets me nodding along every time. Again, not a ton of complexity here, which stunts its ranking a bit, but it's a banger in any case. That much is so certain.
Can't differentiate a girl and I girl.
To be totally honest, Poppy isn't an artist I find particularly interesting. It's not even because of her origins as an internet meme. I don't care about any of that at all. I just haven't found the one song of hers that really does it for me. With that said, gender.
Sometimes I have these thoughts, they leave me all confused. It gets so hard for me.
We don't get many songs that so bluntly question the frivolousness of the gender binary like this one does, and man is that so welcomed. As someone who is also somewhere in between, outside, whatever, yeah, slay.
What does that even mean? I'm somewhere in between.
This song also feels like an attempt to meld those industrial rock vibes with the artist's pop star persona, and in this sense, it does fall a little short. The hooks could stand to be stronger, and the guitar is a bit meatier. I do love the synth though. It's not a tune with a ton of grace or subtlety to it, but all things considered, I do appreciate having it around. Helps that it also kinda rocks, yeah. Well, that's a hell of an opener for sure. What comes after is pretty cool too. Oh yeah, as an introductory track to their debut album, Genesis is an amazing way to bring French house duo Justice into the world. For one thing, this track is very different from DANCE. These synth beats aren't quite so flashy, they're pretty heavy actually, more akin to the thick beats of dubstep. The light disco of a standard French house outfit is still here, but filtered through these wide cinematic gestures, and the result is quite flavorful. Organ beats and guitar samples provide some melodic flavoring as they're slapped around the metaphorical dance floor that is this sonic environment. All of that is to say, this is cool and I like it. Reviewing wordless instrumentals is never my strong suit, and I wouldn't often turn to this in my everyday listening, but it's quite the treat whenever it does happen. Cool. Alright, so this is one of those 80s radio staples that I've heard so many times in my life, but always took for granted. Generally speaking, I'm more of a synth-pop dude than an arena rock fan, but that's not to undermine how cool this one is. Nestled within that big 80s rock sound, we get some unique elements of Celtic rock to drag us back to intrigue, namely those guitars which carry an incredibly palpable bagpipe tone. These little guitar interludes go so damn hard, I can't help but do a little dance every time they happen. The lyrics are a tad abstract, but I interpret the song as a celebration of the human spirit and its ability to pull out glimmers of hope, resilience, and prosperity from life's darkness, much like the lover's voice that guides us toward the mountainside. I still don't love this song, but having reviewed it here, I definitely have that much more of an appreciation for it, and I'm really grateful for that. I genuinely assumed that this was a lesser known song from this artist when I Liz picked it, and oops.
No matter what you say, what you do, when I'm alone, I'd rather be with you.
Generally speaking, I never cared a ton for because the internet as a whole. Early Childish Gambino is kind of a hard sell for me. In any case, much has been made of the lyrical style throughout the album, which combines the absurdity of 2010's hashtag rap with Gambino's penchant for comedic wordplay. Throw in a bit of emotional vulnerability and one of his catchiest hooks, period. And we've got 3005.
Cause I'll be right by your side till 2005. Hold up.
This instrumental alone is really solid, the synth washes and party rhythms popping in and out at just the right moments. And Gambino's performance is also pretty strong. It puts him up front as a pretty typical love song, but his wordy bars are nonetheless imbued with a more earnest desire for connectedness, as well as a deep-seated fear of going through this life all alone.
I've lost all hope of a happy ending, depending on whether or not it's worth it. So insecure, no one's perfect, we spend it.
The second verse elevates the theme further. His flow is still so exquisite, but he also takes so many more pauses between bars, as if to keep himself grounded amidst his crippling anxiety about the future. Throughout all this though, he still finds time to have a little bit of fun, which is really what life is all about, yeah. I've always been quite fond of this one. Glad to finally give this obscure gem the full attention it deserves. Okay, let's cut to the chase. This is now my third time having talked about the Median's arc in a video to some degree. I initially wrote this whole block of text, attempting to unravel the tangled feelings I have about this album, but then I realized none of my criticisms ultimately matter. The summation of this album's message is, I am cringe, but I am free. A statement of free self-expression and permission to be as weird and disruptive and punk as we see fit. The record as a whole is very self-indulgent, and frankly, I get it, even if it's hard to enjoy. But again, that doesn't matter. With that said, So Year is one of the few tracks here that can be called a song in a traditional sense, and it's also one of the strongest demonstrators of its ethos. It's one of the only ones here with a discernible melody to pull out, and the melody is an old meme.
It's raining tacos.
Pretty cringe indeed. I'm too old to have gotten this reference immediately, but it's there. And saturated by Radcliffe with so many layers of glitches and synth noises, it's damn near anxiety inducing. Yet another indication of the artist taking the piss out of her expectations, and gleefully so. So Year does the best job at offering to us the most accessible snapshot of the album while still staying true to its prickly personality all the same. The experience is disorienting at first, but as the song progresses, one can't help but get swept along in its strange atmosphere, until it finds some way to totally upend everything and disorient us all over again. A true exercise in calculated discomfort indeed, which is, again, entirely the artist's point. So with that in mind, where I place this on this ranking is functionally meaningless. Is it good enough to recommend? I don't know, but that's not really the point either. It is quite the experience if nothing else though. And if the track speaks intimately to someone's inner artistic ambitions, well, that makes it more vital to this world than I or anyone else will ever understand.
On the policy of truth.
Depeche Mode are a band I loved a lot when I was a youngster, and honestly, much of the appeal for 12-year-old me boils down to straight vibes. The dark, mysterious atmospheres, down-tempo synths, Dave Gahan's spooky baritone, yeah, that's the good stuff. This can all be heard in Policy of Truth, and that's mainly what the song rides off of. Vibes.
Never again is what you swore the time before.
The layers of synth and percussion are totally slick, but also feel pretty sparse and open, allowing some breathing room for the consistently spooky, almost vampirish quality running throughout. There's a vague narrative of infidelity and betrayal here, but the song is just so dreary, the emotional drive is almost imperceptible. It's true that I've never bothered much with their lyrics, but even the hooks and melodies aren't their strongest here. As such, it's generally never been my favorite of Depeche Mode cuts, but it's still Depeche Mode, who always run at a general base of pretty good, so yeah, it's solid. I've concluded that the best way I could use my Liz picks is not necessarily to show up the best songs, but rather some stuff that more people should know about. Like this one. Violent Magic Orchestra's integration of techno blast beats with black metal style wails is a combination I never considered to exist before, but it sure freaking does. And it works surprisingly well, like an overstimulation of the senses from multiple sides of the landscape. For From my own perspective, this rings similar to the aggressive styles of artists in the EBM genre, such as Combichrist and Suicide Commando, with its industrial elements fiercely melded into harder electronic styles. And even still, VMO take these tendencies to their logical extreme by amping up the intensity on these beats, as well as featuring an actual grindcore vocalist. All of this rubs together until the sparks fly so marvelously. It's all style over substance, true, but boy what a style it is. The final minute of the song is a special kind of incredible, introducing quite the stunning synth line before descending into the darkest depths of black metal hell imaginable. Holy moly, that's the good stuff. I think it's really cool when songs are not only fun to listen to, but also have quite the fascinating backstory attached. As I embark into more Vocaloid pop music, I'm always welcome to hear more great surprises like this. The atmosphere of Unknown Mother Goose is lush and sparkly, and yet imbued with this cold eeriness draped over it all, largely implanted by the robotic vocals of Hatsune Miku. The song is fluid and ever-changing in its structure, with the whirring synth and guitar plucks providing a great driving energy, and yet this ever-pervasive glassiness is, like I said, eerie. And further digging gives me a greater idea of where the spooky quality may arise. Unknown Mother Goose was a return for producer Wawaka after a several-year absence from the scene. Tragically, it would also prove to be his last contribution, as Wawaka would die of heart failure shortly thereafter. The translated lyrics seem to express a general rumination on the pain and beauty of love, though I am particularly invested in the interpretation of this as a lament to his career. The melancholia is deep-seated and so present, as if the producer is reaching through the voice of Miku to tell listeners, I know something's very wrong. Thus, as Wawaka's swan song of sorts, a final thanks to all the elements in his life that had come into perfect harmony to make his career as grand and storied as it had been, it's surprisingly resonant. Definitely going to be remembering this one for quite some time to come. Midwest emo songs with incredibly long titles aren't real, they can't hurt you. Unless...
The last time I stole my father's keys, I couldn't have been older than 19.
I mean, quite literally it's all in the title here. Pet Symmetry gives us an easygoing tune about a dude who steals his dad's car keys to wreak havoc across the titular town. And honestly, that more or less sums it up. It's a brash and mindless display of untethered youth, no more, no less. All trace of consequence from the vandalism and destruction seem to be scrubbed away. As a result, it's a pretty low-stakes narrative, as well as a breezy listening experience. I do admire the little instrumental flourishes, namely the horns that pop in every now and again, though this mostly relies on that slightly sleepy vocal delivery, simple guitar strums, and some fun songwriting along the way. I especially love the rhyming of Protestant booze with stick and poke tattoos.
Protestant booze, stick and poke tattoos.
Certainly not among the most gripping tracks of its kind, but it's a very nice listen nonetheless. Emos just do it better. I do feel a little bad that I've plowed through half of my patron picks already, but y'all are paying for my honest opinion, so there you go. Yeah, leave it to Fox to introduce to me some underground band I've never so much as heard of before. Immediately, I can already tell that this was on some real scuzzy garage rock energy, lying mostly on the heavier, even sludgier slant of the genre. The closest comparison I can make to this is Viagra Boys, and this was a whole 6 years before Viagra Boys debuted, so that's pretty rad. There's a whole lot I really like about this sound, namely the quirky sliding movements of that guitar and the rambunctious energy of its groove, with this vocalist matching the energy so well. Nonetheless, it's a rowdiness that also feels a bit compromised.
Do what you wanna do, see what you wanna see, go where you wanna go.
The punk aspects are present, but feel a bit restrained in lieu of these angular riffs and rhythms. Still, there are a lot of good moments here, particularly this chant-along chorus and the strange middle part where it suddenly gets really pretty. As a whole though, it's pretty dang groovy and I do like it. It just has a ways to go before I could get to loving it, is all. It's time for the novelty furry song of the hour.
Here we go.
First of all, I apologize ahead of time for giving you this relentless earworm for the unforeseeable future, but now y'all know what I've been dealing with for the past several months. Anyway, well, this is a hamster dance, alright. A few silly hooks followed by Hampton himself telling you his dance.
Just stomp your feet and clap your hands. Come on, everybody, it's the hamster dance. Bounce it.
Rinse and repeat, end scene. It's catchy, mindless, fun as heck. A Radio Disney staple in all the best ways. It's the audio equivalent of Fun Dip, a sugary sweet confection joyfully consumed by youngsters through the decades. And yet, reviewing it now has also opened my eyes to how genuinely cool it is. It has those very palpable early 2000s Eurodance textures. Of course, they're very much simplified and distilled down to its basest forms, but they sure are there. It's the kind of blissful bit of inanity that I, as a 33-year-old figment of your imagination, don't indulge in much, but when that nostalgia hits, boy is it wonderful. Diba-dita and all the rest. Let's just get this one out of the way as well. From one childhood staple to another. As with that last one, I can't help but feel I'm just explaining a fact of life to y'all. I mean, this is literally Sandstorm, aka every song to ever exist. While Hamster Dance approaches us with the basest elements of Eurodance, this song does the same except with melodic trance. It essentially rides off a pretty simple string line, some percussion thrown over the top, and that wild as hell riff. Rinse and repeat, end scene. Also like Hamster Dance, it's absolutely silly in its shameless simplicity, but also goes way the hell off. I don't know, something about that build-up that kicks off the final third of the song is just so good in a very primal way. And when Daru throws in those little melodic embellishments into the climax, absolute peak. The mass appeal of Sandstorm is unmistakable, and while I'd never go out of my way to listen to it, dear lord do I appreciate its cultural presence. Do-do-do-do-do, etc. I don't really have a good way to introduce this next one. You just gotta experience it, dudes.
How did you know? I know everything.
DJ Sabrina the Teenage DJ has quickly become a respected name in the outsider house scene, with their knack at creating such warm sonic environments by way of nostalgic samples and beats, which tend to span for a while. And in case you don't have 21 hours of your time to kill, I'd say that How Did You Know is a proper sampling of her sound, yeah. The song doesn't take too long to get itself going, and the propulsive beats, soulful vocal line, melodic synths, and a subtly plaintive guitar line all soon mesh together in a special kind of euphoria. It just plain rules.
I just don't think I'm ever gonna find love.
The vocal samples are where the real magic happens though. With just a few builds and falls, we have a fully realized narrative about the power of love and friendship. That's my own interpretation at least. I don't really know what else to say. Above all else, this just moves me, and there's something really special about that. So I'm not quite sure if this is the right song to introduce Ween onto my channel. Then again, given who they are, I don't think any song would be the right one, so there you go. Not a bad one to start with though, as The Golden Eel is a really intriguing track, with its bubbly synths, manipulated vocals, and uber queasy feel of the environment. With a sound like this, one would imagine lyrics detailing some fantastical, mystical experience. In actuality, it's about tripping on shrooms and talking to fish. Such is the allure of Ween. But once you get past the silliness of it all, you get a pretty solid little jam, one that heavily implements electronic effects across the consistent rising and falling guitar line, resulting in a very aquatic sounding song. It's a cool tune to experience. Can't say I get a ton else out of this one, but sometimes that's all you need, man. Mostly, I'm just glad I got this in a sub-special before Ocean Man, so that's a win for all of us.
Take a shot now. Nobody loves me. It's true.
As I've said, I do struggle a bit with the super chillness of trip hop. With that said, I've always enjoyed Portishead, and Dummy is a great album, even if Sour Times has never really been a standout.
Bear the facts, assume the doubt, and the vows, no need to lie and try.
Nonetheless, there are a couple aspects of the song that stick out for me in particular. First, that sampled guitar line, which is just so nuts, especially in how it's sped up and manipulated to fit the spooky jazz atmosphere. Additionally, Beth Gibbons gives a great vocal performance. I've talked about her plenty on this channel already, so that should come as no surprise.
Circumstance decides. Nobody loves.
I will say though, while the song sounds slick as hell, it also kind of runs along a flat line. You don't get much else from the rest of the song that you get in the first 20 seconds or so. That doesn't make it bad, of course. It's just not all that exceptional in my eyes. Still pretty spooky though.
Hey, there goes the dreams we used to say. There goes the times we spent away.
Oh Jesus, I've got some incredible nostalgia for this one. Some of my earliest childhood memories with music involve listening to the family radio in the early 2000s and recording my favorite pop hits. And this song in particular stands out to me for a variety of reasons. The jazzy, almost carnivalesque melodies across this pop R&B sound is certainly notable. I still enjoy the sound these days, but the addition of the frankly ridiculous inner fantasy of this woman taking her cheating partner's credit card out for the night on the town, well, that elevates it all the more. What's pop music for, if not a bit of wacky escapism now and then? A trip to a land where such actions have no real-world consequence. Honestly, let her cook. She's right, anyway.
There goes the house we made a home. There goes you'll never leave.
Special props to Blue Cantrell. The loose, soulful way she navigates these verses is so addictive, and she really deserved to have a bit more time in the spotlight. All things considered, this is a wonderful swing of a pop jam, one that's totally for the ages. Okay, it's time now for the honorable tradition of this, the number 69 spot. And, I mean, duh, what do you all take me for? So here's a story. Sometime in the mid-90s, an artist collective known as Komar and Melamid ran an experiment. Leapfrogging off of a previous experiment they made, they put forth a poll wherein they asked respondents what they most and least enjoyed in popular music. Then, in collaboration with composer Dave Soldier, the duo released a 2-song EP. The first of these 2 tracks imagine what a song with seemingly every one of these most desirable traits would sound like, and, well, frankly, it's not all that interesting. Turns out the safe and sterile tastes of the general public make for equally as safe and sterile music. No, the most important part of the story is that second track. The one that takes all of these most hated, most unwanted qualities in music and clashes them all together into one 22-minute deranged behemoth of a track. And it's kind of a masterpiece. So, I've listened to a lot of music from all sorts of corners, including a lot of bad music. None of it sounds even a modicum as wild and colorful as a Most Unwanted song. Joke's on all of you. I'm into this. I mean, come on. The funny bagpipes, the opera song rapping, the country banjo picking, the polished adult contemporary balladry, even the whiplash shifting between parts and the half-baked social commentary on American imperialism. It all rules, goddammit. Probably the only part here I could confidently say is not for me are the children's choir bits. But then again, I absolutely cannot imagine the song without them. These kiddos are giving it everything they got, and I'm all for it. However, I do think the song is far more interesting to examine as an artifact of culture, particularly what it represents for music listeners. It's inadvertently become a snapshot of an era where the worst thing you could be as an artist was garish and earnest. Dare to express yourself freely, and congrats, you've got one of the worst songs of all time, apparently. But honestly, there's just so much going on in this song, I literally can't even sample most of it to y'all. At the end of the day, I mostly admire this for being such a great depiction of music nerddom at its most devoted. This is literally just a collection of talented folks coming together and doing this strange strange little experiment for the sheer fun of it, no matter how utterly unlistenable the end result may turn out. And I have nothing but the utmost respect for the ambition. I will likely never feel obligated to give this another listen ever again, especially after having listened to it a dozen times for this video alone, but it's one of the coolest little blips in music history that humanity has ever accomplished, and I'm so happy it exists. Okay, my patrons are the absolute coolest, just throwing that out there. Holy moly, the wave of nostalgia that washed over me when I gave this its first listen is indescribable. I'll admit that I'm not nearly as familiar with Hikaru Utada's earlier stuff as I probably should be, but their 2022 album is great, and I really enjoy their particular brand of ethereal pop. Sadly, I really can't speak to how this connects to Kingdom Hearts at all. That's way outside my wheelhouse. What I can say, however, is that this sounds great. These rough guitars meshing with the dense synthesizer backing often feels to me like it's physically rejecting the typical tropes of pop music, this trait helped by the syncopated percussion and light as air melody. Utada themselves also just sounds terrific. Their voice is intimate and tender as it is huge and domineering. This post-chorus breakdown, where the vocals are spliced and shifted around the guitars, is just grand. It's a fantastical song at its core, despite the hooks faltering alongside the strong layered production. And yet, for what it's worth, it's a lovely little bit of soulful atmospheric pop, and I'm really glad to have dug into it here. Okay, so this rules. Fun fact about me is that I absolutely love the Austin Powers movie franchise, like genuinely. Moreover, it's just so randomly cool how the series masterfully co-opted this decades-old instrumental for their own use, seemingly building the whole colorful retro feel of the movies off its sheer vibes alone, and having it fit like a glove. And this could have only come from a genius like Quincy Jones, who was amazing even before his legendary production run with Michael Jackson. I will admit that it's difficult to separate this instrumental from any Austin Powers connotations, but it's also a great little demonstration of the state of popular jazz at the time. In lieu of jazz's traditional looseness, the sound is now so neat and polished up, and yet not sacrificing a hint of vibrancy. It's a sophisticated slice of cinematic joy that nonetheless feels absolutely party-friendly and never fails to put me in a lively mood every time. Something something Hemlock Springs. Alright, I've waxed poetic about Hemlock Springs so often, I could open up my own candle store. What can I say? The trend is funny, and also, she's just that good. With her introductory singles, Girlfriend and Sever the Blight, Springs had proven that she was more than capable of churning out bangers, and she proved that further with the follow-up that is thrilling and catchy in ways completely unique to itself. That's just genius behavior. Heaven, like many of her other songs, borrows a ton of inspiration from 80s new wave, with an evident darkness to these synth tones that is just addicting. Her exaggerated singing also elevates this from being just another throwaway synth pop track, every line simply brimming with personality. The lines are a bit too abstract for me to get a ton out of, but I also don't really care. The melody alone absolutely kills, and if she didn't already have a few masterpieces under her belt, I'd be thoroughly blown away. As always, I love her. Patiently waiting for that album, girl. Time for disco. Hold the duck. I've tried to get into Sweet Trip in the past, but I don't know, I feel like they're just not for me. In any case, this is by far the hookiest song from the group I've ever heard. It's actually kind of adorable, a vibrant bit of rock-driven indie-tronica with an instantly sticky hook. It also might be the least sweet trippy Sweet Trip song I've ever heard, as I'd sooner expect a barrage of psychedelic glitchiness over the much cleaner pop structure. But I mean, it sure is catchy, so fair enough. There's also this fun internal narrative about the robotic characters at its center, learning to embrace the creature comforts of humankind. Although, yeah, considering the shoegaze fuzz and bouncy guitar rhythms, I can't say I'm ever paying that close attention to them. Mostly, I'm all about the tune here. It sure is a cool one. Probably not the most interesting track from this album I could have pulled apart and analyzed, but if nothing else, I have enjoyed every second I've spent with this one. So, yeah, thanks for this. It's the Porter, once again.
Can't you say sometimes
The second of 2 Porter Robinson tracks in this video. Now, this comes via his trans-centered virtual self moniker and is actually a remix of a pre-existing track, Ghost Voices. That one's pretty solid, some really nice electronic tones and club-ready breakdowns. Honestly, I wish Porter would do more work like this because he's clearly so good at it. Angel Voices uses that same sample as the original, but otherwise, it's a full-scale reinterpretation of Ghost Voices. The beats are heavier, giving this track this really dark and foreboding atmosphere. I also really love how this ultra compression makes the song feel like some forgotten late 90s trance track, unearthed for all the world to witness.
virtual self.
I'll fully admit that most of my time listening to this is me heavily anticipating that monster of a third act drop, but boy what a drop it is. This is one of those aesthetic overall type of tunes, but I know great old school techno vibes when I see it, and this one's just really damn impressive overall. Alright, let's do this.
What a year it's been. A lot of ups and downs, keep falling off the wagon.
I have been getting into Injury Reserve lately, and I do hope I get to talk about their sophomore album someday. Nonetheless, it is interesting that I was passed over a track from their debut record. I've admittedly not heard it nearly as much, but it's notable for being the only album completed during the lifetime of member Stepa J. Groggs, who tragically passed away only a year later.
Ain't doing enough, just doing the most. Tasted some success, and I put that shit in.
As such, well, the opening verse from Groggs is inadvertently so haunting. The way he talks about his struggles with alcoholism, how the come up of the group had motivated him to put these bad habits in check, and the sheer optimism he carries for the future. A future we now know was never to come. It's a really tough listen.
Back. Grandpa call it chasing the dream, and I can't take that.
And while the remaining verses from Richie are certainly solid and the production work absolutely kicks, it's really Groggs himself who instills much of this emotional core. All things considered, I wouldn't exactly say this is one of Injury Reserve's best, but as a predecessor for what would come later, it's certainly a fine piece of work. That much is certain. As someone who struggled with social anxiety my whole life, this one hits so hard. In a weird way.
I got it in the mail one morning. There was no return.
The Dismemberment's Plan's Emergency and I is an excellent slice of loose and anxious indie rock, some of the best of its kind. The centerpiece, You Are Invited, however, is something quite different indeed. For one thing, something like 80% of it is driven by the spare drum beat and very little else, like some cheap hip-hop backing track. Along this beat, we get this loose narrative. Guy gets an invitation to a party kinda sucks, speaker begins to spiral. As you do.
But it said you are invited by any.
He expresses his struggle to feel wanted in this social environment, which speaks to that ever-nagging feeling of inadequacy that can make us feel so estranged from the world. Others may try to console you, but alas, it's much more natural to fall into self-defeating traps, to ignore the open arms because, well, how could you possibly be that important to anyone?
Was thrown by the friend of the next thing. I wasn't sure if I should go.
Then the story takes a turn toward acceptance. After all, there simply must be a reason why people gravitate his way. And even if there isn't, who cares? He is so needed all the same. And then we get the song's finest moment.
But she looked at me with a glazed smile and said, you are invited.
The moment where the guitars finally come in and fire off on all cylinders. It's goddamn good. One of the best moments of clarity in all of music, I swear.
I threw it down at his feet, and I said, "You are invited."
And then it comes full circle, when he finds himself validating another, just as he'd been validated himself. Like I said, this is a bit of a weird one, but it's also so incredibly life-affirming in its own special way. And I'll always love songs like those. Alright, we got a little freaky there, so let's get freakier. Okay, sure, since I made it so clear last time how much I struggle with instrumentally dense electronic music, of course this is the video where I get a bunch of them for me to inevitably disappoint my viewers. This is how I alienate my fan base, I suppose. Anyway, You Like Music is, yes, true, but it is also the zillionth album from vaporwave artist Death's Dynamic Shroud in collaboration with Galen Tipton, and Generate Utopia is its best track. This automatically gets a leg up for the sheer fact that I've heard very little that sounds like it. I just mentioned vaporwave, but honestly, there's little here that really points to the tropes of that genre. Rather, this is more of a club song, mostly heard in that infectious bass beat. Most everything else on top of it just does whatever the hell it wants. It's filled to the brim with these squeaky, mechanical synth tones, heavily manipulated samples, distorted piano chords, and God knows what else, all fighting for center stage in some wild electric rave, and it's an absolute sight to behold. And with all the vocal parts strewn within, it's ultimately so impressive just how naturally all these pieces fit together. To put it simply, it's the audio equivalent of pop rocks, in all the absolute best ways. We're already freaking it up here, why stop now?
Check it out. Ooh, that dress so scandalous, and you know I never couldn't handle it.
Okay, see, this song gets right what Submissive and Breedable just failed to do. Like, Cisco and company already fully mastered the art of silly seduction way back in the year 2000. Why even try anymore?
All night long, let me see that song.
I love this song. I have always loved this song. Y2K era R&B was on a whole other level entirely. When else are we gonna get a hit that uses some lush, lovely string backing playing out the singer's ode to women's underwear? And yes, this song is incredibly silly. From the half-assed lyricism to Cisco's playful ad-libs and harmonies to the use of the word thong as a percussive beat. To that climax that doesn't need to go remotely as hard as it does, but it does. I'm not going to pretend it's secretly complex either. It's about as shallow as Submissive and Breedable, the difference being that this is clearly for mature audiences while leaning fully into its premise, which is why it works so well. Helps that Cisco himself is genuinely just so talented. It's incredible. I can't help it. This rules. Okay, let's just get one thing out of the way. Somehow, I just found out this is a cover.
Zephyr in the sky at night, I wonder, do your tears...
This is Curtis Muldoon, a folk duo from the UK who recorded the original version of this tune way back in 1971. I have no idea how common this knowledge is, but you're welcome, I guess. Yeah, this tune is a classic, and honestly, knowing that it's at least partially a cover does make me appreciate it that much more. Madonna, along with producer William Orbit, do a great job at transcribing the tune from its classic folk environment into a more layered 90s progressive trance instrumentation. Moreover, well, I've listened to every Madonna album, and I can tell you with certainty that it's pretty rare for her to sound as lively and free as she does here. Which is totally fitting considering the themes of spiritual rebirth and independence. It's vibrant, triumphant, and just a bit futuristic, but makes its turn so smooth and effortlessly. Altogether, it's just a damn good radio staple. Plain and simple. This one took a little while to click for me, which is actually a bit strange considering how suited this is for my particular taste. Big glossy synths, new wave production, and it's an early cut from Gary Newman, and I sure do love me some Pleasure Principle. Nonetheless, well, I had to do some digging here. I have a huge soft spot for this early era of synth-pop, wherein these electronic environments, still pretty rudimentary at this point, begin to cross over into more pop orientation, albeit one with a particular stilted coldness. Tunes like Our Friends Electric are so unique and weird. I love them so.
So now I'm alone. Now I can think for myself.
And likewise for its premise, which imagines a futuristic world ripped straight from a sci-fi novel. One wherein humans and robots coexist, occupying the same spaces, yet always still with that inherent sense of disconnect. We don't really know if our friends are electric. And so it goes.
So I'll find out your reason for the phone calls and smiles.
I've seen interpretations of this song as a metaphor for Gary Numan's experience with neurodivergence, the disoriented ability to read the emotions of others, and in turn, being so consistently misread himself. I can't speak on this myself, but it does make the content of the song all that more transfixing. Even beyond this, we still got some tremendously captivating synth hooks to guide us along, and sometimes that's all you really need. 2000s era rock music was, unquestionably for me, the coolest time for music. Even still, I always found it funny how Helicopter has been widely seen by my peers as Block Party's signature song. I think Banquet fits the bill for me a little better, but I guess that's just my opinion. It doesn't really matter anyway, this one rips all the same. It's all about those guitars, man. The way they're constantly, fiercely shifting and turning upon itself, which in turn creates the very framework upon which the rest of the song spirals. Moreover, Kele Okereke has got to be one of the best leading men of the scene. The energy he distills into this one so perfectly matches the wild gusto of the music. He's just so good. These lyrics mainly touch upon the political state of the current world as it stood in 2004, specifically from the perspective of a British immigrant. And yet it's also but another song where the instrumentals take so much leadership, the themes themselves are comparatively abstracted. Not gonna complain about a song that rocks this hard though. This next one was really tricky to rank, y'all. And considering what song it is, I don't think I can be blamed.
Yeah. The people they won't leave, what is threatening about divesting in one piece.
So, let me state for the record that no matter anything else, the fact that Heinz Hall exists at all is great. As far as high-profile names are concerned, this is one of the most explicit messages of support for free Palestine, along with the criticism toward the US government, who have failed their people by allowing the genocide in Gaza to occur untethered. Macklemore made a protest song during a time when such a voice of support was most needed. I've never been a fan of Macklemore's music, but it is comforting to know that he is someone who could stand by the rest of us as a human being, first and foremost.
Actors and badges protecting property in a system that was designed by white supremacy.
But, well, he is also a musician. And this is a song of his I have been assigned to review. It strikes me as a little awkward having the song here because while it surely speaks to much wider universal issues such as capitalism, white supremacy, and the prison industrial complex, it's also a very insular tune, making references that immediately date it to that particular time in spring of 2024.
TikTok, take us out the algorithm, but it's too late. We've seen the truth, we bear witness.
It's a very time and place sort of song, lacking the kind of generation-spanning universality seen in similar songs like Fight the Power or The Black of the Berry. It's also very blunt and informative, not quite so invested in any poetic or otherwise artistic perspective on the situation, which, yes, does work to radicalize listeners, and that is good. It's just so different from the others here.
History been repeating for the last 75. The Nakba never ended, the colonizer lied.
Heinz Hall is a track where the message is what's most important, and again, the message is good. The intentions are honorable. Macklemore clearly wanted a song to resonate with a large body of people, and that is what he made. The track has made a difference, even if it does very little for me as a song. And on that note, none of the songs I place above this one are better than the concept of a free Palestine. Don't you dare get my words twisted.
You can't twist the truth, the people out here united. Never be defeated when freedom's on the horizon.
And, well, emotions are high, tensions are high, and as of now, we've yet to see a resolution to the conflict. Amidst it all, we've got a song that was made in a moment of desperation, one that encapsulates what many of us have been feeling this past year. Anger, exhaustion, the need to do something, anything to help people. It may not be a great song, but it's a great call to action. There will always be a time to fight, and for someone like him to stand alongside the rest of us in the fight, well, regardless of anything else, that is nothing short of commendable. Palestine must be free. Today, tomorrow, and forever. Alright, so that last one got away from me a little bit. But here's another message I think we all can agree on. This review will probably run longer than the song itself. Yeah, leave it to hardcore punk to blast you in the face with violence, if only for a brief blip of time. It's probably for the best that the song, as uncompromising as it is also this short. But I mean, what else is there really to say? The message is blunt and to the point, fitting for many a purpose, but it's worth noting that this song was originally intended to condemn the hardcore scene's increasing appropriation of far-right iconography within its communities, which inevitably opened the door for actual fascists to invade their spaces, because of course it would. It's probably not the first punk song with such a message, but it's so damn sharp about it, it's hard to ignore. This song is like a hammer in how it slams down its message swiftly, loudly, and clearly. Nonetheless, I do tend to prefer the Kennedy songs that demonstrate more by way of hooks and melody. This remains yet another message first type of song, but boy what a message it is.
Paper bag, hunger hurts, and I want 'em so bad.
I do love Fiona Apple. Kind of typifies how great she is at Paper Bag is very good, and also probably wouldn't even make my top 10 of her songs. Nonetheless, I do love the jazzy delivery, her unique vocal flourishes accenting seemingly every word of the song, making it such a delectable listening experience.
Then the dove of hope began its downward slope,
and coupled with John Bryan's equally as jazzy arrangement, with its strong pianos and cinematic horns, we get this tale of romantic longing, spoken from the lips of someone who realizes that perhaps the strife of the journey isn't really worth it.
Baby said he couldn't stay, wouldn't put his lips to mine.
Something like a relationship seems so appealing from a distance, yet with her own personal baggage, the pursuit becomes trickier, even uglier, the closer she wills herself toward it.
I thought he was a man, but he was just a little boy. Hunger hurts.
There's just so much poetry rung through practically each and every line here, the kind of song that practically demands a close analysis. It's an incredible display of complex introspection. Give it a listen, see what you yourself get out of it. Oh man, I am so glad this one was voted in, as this has always been one of my favorite relatively forgotten neo-soul hits of the 2000s. India Arie, first and foremost, is such a great vocalist, and she enunciates each and every phrase of video with this fabulous air of sophistication and confidence.
When I look in the mirror, the only one there is me.
That guitar rhythm is to die for, and that chorus melody has firmly stuck itself in my brain for 2 straight decades. And it is, indeed, a song concerned with positive body image and sense of self, from the perspective of a woman who doesn't really fit all those pesky Western beauty standards. Now, I do think it falls into some misguided perceptions on what true beauty is. I get that she's approaching this from a personal perspective, but these statements tend to just trade in one standard of class for another, and might not work as well as she thinks it does.
Don't need your silicone, I prefer my own. What God gave me is just fine.
But as she said herself, she's just speaking her mind, and the song at least comes across as a satisfying conclusion to a presumed life of insecurity and self-loathing. And if even one person out there can feel empowered by this, well, more power to him. In any case, man is this a jam, absolutely smooth as heck. This submitter completely understood the assignment, by the way. Hot emo summer forever, baby. So I'm in a strange position with this song. I've been familiar with it for, geez, most of my life now. Yet being now in the position to analyze it, I'm drawing several blanks. The taste of ink by The Used has simply always been a fact of life for me, and it just as simply brings me back to an uncomplicated time where I can just jam along to a cool song with a great chorus without entertaining the need to decipher why.
So here I am, it's in my head.
I mean, sure, there's some breakup narrative strung throughout this one, but I've never paid much attention to it at all. It's not even all that sad. Rather, the tone leans heavily on that pummeling punk energy captured in those heady guitars and the screechy vocals of Burt McCracken. It's just a huge, almost uplifting song at its core. And, well, that's just the thing. This song to me has always felt much bigger than the sum of its parts, speaking to a much more universal, indescribable feeling. Hell, the line, "I'll savor every moment of this," that alone is just so goddamn life-affirming. It's incredible. And a mantra I've only continued to hold close as I've grown older. The nostalgia is real and true, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Your queen has arrived.
She was a playboy, Bridget Bardot.
None of us were the least bit prepared for the Chapel Roan moment, I swear. I can't say I really love much of her music, but I am so happy we have her around. Red Wine Supernova has star-making turn written all over it. The synths are nice and warm, the mood playful, silly, and just a little weird, and all with this effortless air of romance that is completely her own. And of course, it is so gay. We simply need more songs like this. So here's the thing, this song is objectively just a lighthearted tune about hooking up with hot chicks. Nonetheless, it's also got me thinking about how much this song could resonate with so many queer folks who feel lonely and directionless in a world that doesn't prioritize their needs. We grow up within an obsessively heteronormative culture, one that is just so goddamn normalized and unquestioned. And once we realize that this is not who we are, we find ourselves a bit lost, oblivious, or uneducated on how to approach love and sex in like a gay way. Thus, Red Wine Supernova opens up the door to new possibilities. You could dwell in this insecurity and just feel miserable about yourself, sure. Or you can take ownership of your queerness in whatever way feels right. We're never going to be taught the right way to court others, so we can't help it if we say things that are a bit blunt and embarrassing. If the other party's down for it, why even stress? Chapel Roan's style is really quirky and a bit odd, but so is being queer, y'all. Queer is cringe and free, and life is short, so why not have a little fun and kiss a bunch of cute girls along the way? Sounds good to me. You know I couldn't leave my boy out of the picture.
Sometimes I wanna take the car out on the road, flip it into...
Oh, Jeff Rosenstock. I could make a whole video about this guy alone, I think. As someone who has listened to a sizable portion of his music, I'll admit that The Beauty of Breathing is likely the most distilled version of a Rosenstock song you can get. You've got that catchy pop-punk riff, which chugs along as the artist sings of his personal anxieties and mental health crises, this exacerbated by the wider world at large. Specifically though, the song so clearly and effortlessly sums up that one vicious cycle, reaching out to others because you're so damn depressed and desperate to connect, only to be given the same useless advice, again and again. Try taking some deep breaths. You'll feel a lot better if you do. Not the best advice for a chronic overthinker. The mere thought of a blank slate for a brain is goddamn laughable to me. That's why I'm so freaking sad. And I'm constantly so impressed at how well Rosenstock can pinpoint these very specific struggles that can feel so alienating sometimes. Again, this is one of the more to the point of his tunes you can get, but with a track record as consistent and solid as he has, I'm more than happy to indulge.
I hurt myself today.
First and foremost, I'm not particularly interested in giving my take on which version of the song is better. If you really want to know, give me the 9 Inch Nails original next time. Regardless, it certainly stands among the best covers I've ever heard. Johnny Cash is just that good.
And you could have it all.
The drug-fueled misery and suicidal ideations of Trent Reznor's words are given a whole other level of resonance, coming from the mouth of an elderly country star prepared to leave his legacy behind for good. I grew up listening to Cash, so hearing that familiar baritone, once strong and pronounced and now weary and shaky with the weight of the years, I can't deny, it's a bit eerie.
Everyone I know goes away.
If there's anything that holds a song back though, it's Rick Rubin's production, which always felt too clean and polished for the heaviness that a song like Hurt requires. However, Cash himself brings it back home. Lines like, "Everyone I know goes away in the end," has such a different hue to it, coming from someone who has experienced the pain of death many times and knows deep in his bones that it's just around the corner for him. It may not be a perfect cover, but it is nevertheless still pretty great. I can't argue with that. Respectfully, I don't think y'all are ready for this one. Okay, let's start at the beginning. From my very limited understanding of Einstein on the Beach, it is a lengthy, experimental type of opera that favors a more formalist style to its structure versus any strict narrative that traditional opera tends to employ. Did I mention that it's lengthy? Yep. Technically, it revolves around the life of Albert Einstein, but expresses this through a series of simple storyboards and structured spaces, all set to music that sounds like this. There's little particular reasoning for this audio calamity as we perceive it, except as a structure itself. And with that said, the play's climax, Spaceship, is, in a word, mesmerizing. The use of the firm arpeggios and repetitive 1-2-3-4 system takes the concept of formalism down to its natural bass elements, and it's oddly pleasing to the ear. My ear anyway. Philip Glass is something else, man. I do not have the stomach to experience a 5-hour opera in its entirety, but I sure do love this swirling sound and feverish energy as a centralized experience all its own. In any case, this does hold a special distinction of being the least song I've likely ever covered on my channel, at least until 433 finally gets voted in. That'll be your call, folks. Big thanks to my brony friends for making my sub-specials all that more, well, special. This song is very, very cool, and honestly, I could pretty much just end this review with that comment. As I've said with pretty much every other MLP track that comes my way, I have absolutely no connection to nor nostalgia for the franchise, so I'll stay mum on that angle, lest I make a fool out of myself. Lucky for me though, there really isn't a ton of context to grasp on number 15. It's just a bop.
Phase 2.
All things considered, this is basically just a funky little fusion jazz jam, save for a few vocal samples which I assume are from the show. Some perky jazz as a skeleton, which transitions to a section for the woodwinds, which transitions to a key section, which then, well, I don't really want to give too much away, as so much of the appeal is experiencing all the twists and turns as they occur and basking in the sheer, vibrant goodness of it all. Even still, I also sense a story being spun from the samples, as well as the melodic rises and falls. It feels to me like a race of sorts, the kind you see in the average Saturday morning cartoon. That's just so cute, and considering how rad it sounds among it all, I could only have all the respect for it. Katie Lang needs a lot more love these days, as they've given quite the legacy in their field of country pop from a palpably queer perspective that should not be overlooked. Constant Craving, on that note, is one of a number of subtle masterpieces they got under their belt. They're so good.
And
It's a simple song with not a ton of lyrics to it, but Lang sure does squeeze every drop of emotion out of each word, whether crooned or belted. And just as crucial is a layered adult contemporary sound, with the interplay between the weeping accordion, country guitars, soft strings and percussion, and even some delicate xylophone touches, all joining forces for quite the decadent listening experience. 90s country production has never totally sat right to my ears, but this gets it absolutely right. It's incredible. And as the title suggests, this song is about craving, namely this gnawing, often frustrating hunger as an inevitable part of life, a sign of living itself. It's quite the validating message, actually, a reminder that we all have our own inner cravings and are thus never alone in our deep dissatisfaction with things. Maybe this is the beauty of breathing they've talked about after all. Real recognizes real for sure.
I'm two kinds of potential. Plus new ice house to sweat your warm 1, 2, I'm
For all intents and purposes, I adore Azealia Banks. As an artist. Say what you will, there really is no one else quite like her, and it's been such a blast living in the same timeline as her. For better or, well, anyway.
I'm two kinds of potential. Plus new ice house to sweat your warm 1, 2, I'm contestant.
The energy is downright vibratory as Azealia takes in this spacey hip house beat from producer Lone and threads her liquid smooth flex flows all over the damn thing. And yes, this is a pre-existing tune. Aquamarine is a fierce track all its own, with the psychedelic vibes meshing beautifully with those melodic synths and dense, danceable rhythms. It's a neat sound already, which makes it even more remarkable just how naturally Banks takes control of it, like it's just another walk in the park for her. According to the artist, the titular Count Contessa is an in-universe character, a black female pirate with only one eye and leg, yet possessing all the strength of a man nonetheless. It's a strange flex track, but also kinda gender? Not impossible to read it as such anyway. If nothing else, it's one hell of a vibe, yeah. I'm ever so slowly easing my way toward comfortability with Vocaloid-led pop songs. On that note, this is actually pretty atypical from the Vocaloid I've experienced. Shoujo Rei trades in the standard electronic atmosphere in lieu of some more organic textures with strumming guitars and soft percussion included. Same goes for Hatsune Miku's voice here, which honestly just has a really nice tone to it, in spite of the inherent stiffness. I was already digging the sound, but a close translation of the track is what pushed it up to another level for me. And you know what? Let's just play it safe. Content warning, for discussion is suicide. Please go to this timestamp if you'd like to skip. I'll give you a few extra seconds to do so. And here we go. To put it shortly, the song is about a young person grieving over the suicide of a classmate who was seemingly a victim of bullying leading up to her death. To make matters worse, while the speaker considered this girl their friend, some signs reveal that they may have also been complicit in this bullying themselves. As such, they are not only experiencing the grief from the senseless loss, but doing so with the knowledge that they were directly involved with their turmoil. And from all this, we get no real conclusion, except in the ever-persistent haunt that exists in the form of this girl's memory. It's, of course, a very dark song thematically, but the brightness of the sound, the soaring melodies, the lively environment, the stunning climax, all this hints at some, as of now, unknown closure that may be found in some point of the future. In any case, wow am I impressed by this, for sure. Another great Carly Rae Jepsen song? Next you're gonna tell me this snake is cute. Yeah, honestly, pretty much any Jepsen song from the Emotion era is bound to do well here. That should come as no surprise. So I've lately been re-listening through all the hits from the 2010s for reasons, and I'm noticing some surprising change of heart on a few of my former faves. Here's one of the most surprising to me. Yeah, so Teenage Dream has grown off me a lot. Can't totally explain why for now, but I will say that Cut to the Feeling captures pretty much the same niche for me these days, just done way better. The production to this one is just terrific, with a healthy combination of that mid-10s pop sound with new disco elements that give it that special timelessness, and it all just swells, certainly fitting for these yearning feelings toward that special kind of deep, youthful love. I'll admit that Jepsen's voice isn't really what I come to her songs for, but she sounds pretty good here. She's so exuberant, almost demanding, and you could practically feel every ounce of feverish feeling flowing right out of every word she sings. It doesn't do a ton to set itself apart from the emotion sound, true, but I just can't deny a great sugary pop song when I hear it, and this totally fits the bill. Another Liz subscriber special, another Bush era protest jam. It's really funny how this keeps happening.
The sun came up with no conclusions, flowers.
Bright Eyes, I'm Wide Awake It's Morning is one of the formative albums of my musical upbringing. I was definitely a Conor Oberst fanboy. Nonetheless, Road to Joy is the closer to the album, and yeah, this one's taken a while for me to really get to loving it. I'm talking like 2 decades.
So I'm drinking, breathing, writing, singing every day.
Through a pretty spare guitar rhythm in that familiar, if a bit humdrum Beethoven interpolation, Oberst lays out a series of scattered statements that are all seemingly disconnected. There were a lot of pleasant moments instrumentally, such as the skittering drum rhythms and melodic horns. And through it all, it does really feel like Oberst reconciling with the world's atrocities. Indeed, this was quite the messy time in general, so this would have rang as particularly resonant to 2000s audiences.
I read the body count out of the paper.
He reads about the wartime casualties in the morning paper and laments on he's expected to simply move about his day as if it's no inconvenience. And yet, with the mile-a-minute rate at which his mind races with these conflicting, feverish emotions, it's clear that this very much is an inconvenience.
And no one's sure how all of this got started.
This one, strangely enough, seems to have had the opposite phenomenon as Heinz Hall for me. It's just as laser focused on a particular time frame, yet with how abstracted it is lyrically, it's taken the benefit of hindsight to recognize the power behind the words and scenarios and the specific way he lays it out. It's a genuinely great slice of the collective state of mind at this particular time, and the moment where the instrumentals suddenly explode in that noisy bout of rage at the song's conclusion.
Failures always sounded better. Let's fuck it up, boys. Make some noise!
Well, that's all I could ask for, really. Holy moly, that's the good stuff. Again, leave it to my patrons to understand the assignment. Always and forever.
And to the people making life lost, abusing choice, and the fuckers who make fools.
Our Lives Will Make a Sad, Boring Movie is the opening track to the Hotelier's debut album, and boy, what an introduction it is. It immediately has all the touchstones of solid pop punk. Prominent guitar hooks, dueling vocals, chantalogue movements, all that good stuff.
And we say every day that we won't grow up to live the life.
So, how much trouble would I be in if I said that this was just a better version of that Good Charlotte song? I'm mostly being silly, but with that said, it does have much of the same ethos, told with a finer brush and skilled hand. The utter refusal to step in line and follow the same dead-end trodden paths of our ancestors. Difference being that the Hotelier takes it one step further and spins it all into a fervent critique of capitalism, which makes such a difference. Why waste our lives slaving away for soulless bosses when we could focus our time and energy on those bits of happiness that truly matter?
We sing along.
Sure, this could stand to be a bit more fleshed out, but it's still impressively sharp for a debut. I already know that they make better records in the future anyway. I just love how they take this familiarly punkish refusal of social norms and spin a whole life-affirming statement from it all. We're dead in our future, but we're not dead yet. So let's try to make ourselves the best people we can, while we still can. God, yeah, this is great. Sometimes it's not even that deep. Sometimes I just like good music. Man Man is very cool, utilizing their dark cabaret flavors to grant us multitudes of sordid tales, like contemporary raconteurs of sorts. Poor Jackie is just one of them, this track giving to us what I could only describe as a reinterpretation of Jack the Ripper. If Jack the Ripper cross-dressed, seduced men, and literally cut their hearts out for the sheer sport of it. Horror. But then, we pivot to a first-person narrative from the point of view of someone who was enamored with this woman. He recognizes her homicidal ways, not as acts of heartless cruelty, but as magnificent displays, perhaps even works of art. The music swells in intensity as we go deeper into this man's depraved curiosity, which soon grows into total obsession.
I don't see what everybody...
Our speaker sees his life as a downward spiral from which he sees no escape, except through the enticing chance of being slain by this beautiful woman. Thus, he roams the dark, dangerous streets, hoping for even the slightest possibility to encounter Jackie. He's romanticized this prospect long enough, and his eventual death by her hands is absolutely worth the chance. It's a pretty morbid narrative, and one that lays bare some of humanity's darkest mental impulses to plunge headfirst into the fiery, yet oh so attractive pits of hell. And with such invigorating music guiding us along, this journey may very well be so worth it after all. Spectacular stuff. From man to woman. I don't know, just play the song.
Every day I'm a motherfucking woman, baby, alright.
I'll probably never know what it's like to be a hot lady, but damn does this song give me a pretty good idea. I've reviewed quite a few Kesha songs at this point, and yet this might be the one I'm most willing to replay at damn near any occasion. It's so darn fun. It has all the loose spontaneity of an on-the-fly jam session, from the outtake that introduces the song,
Let's be serious. This is, excuse me.
Okay, shut up.
to the slightly off-the-rails moment in the second verse.
Lucy as a goosey, and we're looking for some fun.
Through it all, Kesha sounds so great. She owns every moment here, to be sure, but the inclusion of the Dap King's horns is also so incredibly inspired. I simply could not imagine this song without all the little flourishes and instrumental breaks they bring.
Don't buy me a drink, don't make my money, don't touch my weed, don't call me honey.
Most importantly though, this is such a powerful song. A loud and proud celebration of feminine strength to be blasted in the face of the pervasive grip of the patriarchy. It's true that it lyrically follows the same beats as so many empowerment anthems through the years, but it's also made abundantly clear just how personal this is to Kesha herself. Based on the single that preceded this one, she's more than earned this pride. It totally rips, in all kinds of ways. God, the vibes to the entirety of Mercurial World are just immaculate. And that also rings true for Secret's Your Fire. I already love the G-Funk synths at the introduction, which soon make way for a retro R&B beat and that slightly sultry, slightly weird nasally vocals of the singer. Effortlessly cool is the most succinct way to describe this track. Just one listen is all it takes to see the appeal. Thematically, it handles the topic of online interconnectivity, the inexplicable need to reveal the most private aspects of one's life in order to deem oneself valuable in the social marketplace of the world. The act of secrecy, once a fact of life, is damn near a commodity these days with how much we are driven by our compulsions.
I don't wanna feed more oxygen to your fire, your
Which also speaks to the entitlement of audiences to reach into the worlds of people they only think they know. As someone who works in internet spaces, this phenomenon is annoying at best, fear-inducing at worst. Still, the song examines these themes without simply telling it to us. It's just showy, just flashy enough to be interesting, which in turn makes the dark, mysterious undertones of the lyrics all that more compelling, like its own little secret. It's kind of brilliant, actually. Besides all that, it's just a neat, groovy little tune, and it's really good at being exactly that. Fascinating stuff. Okay, so I know we've been getting into some really positive territory, feeling really good and stuff, but I've got to handle something really quick. Remember I said at the start of this video that I'll be getting to my number 100 later? Well, it's later. Content warning. The following segment contains references to gang violence, sexual assault, and suicide. Please head over to this timestamp at your discretion to skip. Again, a few more seconds to do so. Okay, I've been putting this one off for too damn long. Let's get on with it.
I once knew a nigga whose real name was William. His primary concern was making $1 million.
One thing you should know about me is that I have absolutely no patience for shock rap. So unluckily for me, I get what has to be the epitome of such, the kind of song set out to shock listeners and do little else, really. Again, no patience whatsoever.
A feeble-minded young man with infinite potential, the product of a ghetto-bred capitalistic mental.
Now, I'm gonna go ahead and spoil the premise of the song because I don't really respect the culture that has put it on its deranged pedestal. You saw the content warning, expect some of that. Through his rough and gritty bars, Immortal Technique tells a story of a troubled young man who pursues a life of crime. His drive to gain the respect of more superior gang members leads him to take on a task to prove his worth.
And they wanted to test him before business started, suggested raping a bitch to prove he was cold-hearted, so now he had a choice.
They hunt down this poor woman they see on the street, and then the rapper describes the violent sexual assault that occurs forthwith in honestly way too much detail. Again, all for the sake of shocking his audience. And well, here's a twist.
But what he saw made him start to cringe and stutter, cause he was staring into the eyes of his own mother. She looked back at him and cried cause he had forsaken her. She cried more painfully, and when they were raping her.
Yeah, I am not pleased. And honestly, I don't know why you would request this song from me in the first place. What do you expect me to get out of this? The song ends with our protagonist subsequently ending his own life over the horror of the situation, his mother being killed soon afterward. And somehow there's still one more twist, because of course there is.
And listen, cause the story that I'm telling is true, cause I was there with Billy Jacobs and I raped his mom too, and now the devil.
This is a true story, apparently? Okay, listen. This was obviously not going to be my cup of tea in the first place. I mean, I'm sure that these kinds of violent rituals happen in gangs more often than we realize. There's certainly room to discuss these narratives free of censorship. I'm just physically unable to be moved by this in any substantial, productive way. Because, I'll just say it, Dance with the Devil feels like a cartoon, like one of those made-for-adult animated shows that thinks that throwing as much sex and violence at the screen justifies its for mature audiences label. Sure, the story may be rooted in reality, but it treats the grisliness of the situation like a cheap horror movie plot, with twists and turns that feel less bone-chilling on a deep human level, and mostly just pasted on for tacky jump scares. I just don't think that there was any message intended for the song beyond a very blanket, dirty deeds leads to dirty consequences. No way, there is a message, and it sucks ass, dude.
And now the devil follows me everywhere that I go. In fact, I'm sure he's standing among one of you at my shows. In every street cipher listening to Little Thug's flow. He could be standing right next to you and you wouldn't know. The devil.
We're all Frankies, I guess. Alright, no one is perfect. We are all capable of bad things. However, no, I do not believe that the average person is willing to rape and murder innocent people for the pursuit of empty riches. That's just childish reasoning. Another thing, I am so tired of the constant need to use sexual violence against women for greater emotional appeal. I don't really know where else to put that point, but oh my god, I hate it so much. There are simply so many better, more nuanced ways to display the darkness of society, and there are so many rappers that do exactly this. McKinley Dixon, Billy Woods, Mac Homie, Danny Brown, Navy Blue, and those are just some of the ones who've released music recently. I'm not missing anyone particularly relevant to this year, am I?
I hope you find some peace of mind in this lifetime.
Oh yeah, true.
Tell him you're...
I've been going through something.
Up through the release of his album Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, Kendrick Lamar made quite the name for himself as one of the most talented names in the game. Even still, the album's terrific opener shows a whole other side to the musician yet to be revealed.
What is a rapper with jewelry? A way that I show my maturity. What if I call on security?
Through the ever-shifting mood and instrumental palette of ominous piano, feverish percussion, and other jazzy coloring, we're given a more mature, enlightened Lamar. The album further reveals his move toward therapy for more spiritual connectedness, which further displays the deep-seated traumas which have weighed him down for years. United in Grief specifically speaks on his fame, the ways in which the wealth of prosperity, once a marker of success from his past struggles, have, in actuality, drilled him even further into the darkness, like a snake eating its own tail.
I grieve different.
Not to beat a dead horse, but I do think it's worth noting that while Immortal Technique fails to realistically grapple with the ramifications and traumas of intercommunal violence, Lamar on the other hand does attempt to steer a conversation, as humanly reluctant as he might be to dig too deeply. One could hear in both the music and his delivery that he really truly cares as he unravels the ugliest parts of himself, his abusive and self-destructive tendencies, and how these qualities intertwine with his lavish lifestyle to create some sick form of indulgence.
So what? realized the county building controlled us. I brought a Rolex watch, I only wore it once. I bought infinity pools I never swam in.
It's certainly true that mental health struggles are often not something that could simply be therapied away. But what United in Grief does is reach within this very personal narrative and pull out the threads of nuance to tie to listeners, despite how uncomfortable these conversations are, despite how hard they might be to hear. Shock value is cheap and easy. Making even a tiny difference in the world through the beauty of music is what I find truly commendable. Alright, let's get this video back on the rails again with the last of my patron picks. Interesting.
You're tearing me apart.
I know very little about London collective Archive, and I've also never totally loved what I heard from them. On that note, I can't see Again as anything but their masterpiece.
If I was to walk away.
At its surface, this song is a 16-minute prog rock piece with little by way of sonic complexity. It's a 3-part structure mostly. A quiet intro to set the stage, a sudden burst of energy to shift into a mid-tempo, almost trip-hop groove, and a long ambient ending to guide us out. It doesn't tend to disclose much in its hooks or grooves, but the song is nonetheless invigorating enough for me to stay enamored through its whole run. At its core, this is mostly a song about heartache, the kind of which we've heard time and time again. Archive elevates this material further, though, by allowing vocalist Craig Walker to stretch his turmoil across the expanse of the track, as if to somehow properly capture every significant dimension of this emotion that cannot be expressed through mere words. The resulting song is a rich and detailed tapestry, one that meticulously pulls out every moment of anguish as each second passes, like a roughly squeezed lemon. Sweet in substance, bitter in taste. And for as long and textured as it is, it's the partaking in the journey that matters the most here. And again, haha, I'm no prog rock expert by any means, I just know that this is good music for my ear holes. I invite you to give it a play to decide for your own selves. I think it'll be well worth it. It's not very often that songs that are new to me make it up this high in my subscriber specials, but I think this one is very much worth it.
All I wanna do is play with sticky wet mud, make mud cakes and feed them to my breath.
So immediately, a big source of the song's appeal to me is its sound. I'd say it's at least hyperpop adjacent, with the slams and glitches of the instrumental forming brick by brick this richly dark atmosphere, around which Periwinkle travels. Also, this chorus just rules. Easily one of the catchiest of this whole list. Ouroboros addresses the topic of the artist's very real near-death experience, and it's clear that the song is a therapeutic exercise of sorts. She tells of the traumatic incident with a certain matter-of-fact delivery, her mind darting with philosophical questions as if she's within a therapy session right this moment.
The question is, am I the same? I felt like I've changed since I had that near-death experience.
And it's all about this idea of a rebirth, an end of one's life stage to make way for another. She no longer sees herself as the same careless person she was before her accident. That era has ended. Even still, she also knows that she cannot truly begin her new lease on life until her own healing completes itself. However long that takes. Thus, the song is riddled with anxiety, even panic, as she constantly grips for answers that may not be there. Her heavily manipulated vocals give this track a distinct coldness, an almost mechanical feel to her singing that is, nonetheless, absolutely bursting with a life, anxious to sprout into this next world anew. And despite the frigid nature of this track, it nonetheless remains so incredibly resonant, certainly in its loose melodrama. And on top of it all, man has it stuck to my brain so well. As deep and meaningful as it undoubtedly is, it's also the weirdest, best kind of bop. And that's just so incredibly cool. And speaking of weird bops, yep, here we go again. Yeah, at this point, I am absolutely a member of the Hakushi Hasegawa fan club. The vibes in their music are just immaculate, and their latest album indicates that they're only getting better, which is so very exciting to see. Mouthflash may be one of the most accessible of the spread, which is saying something. I mean, just listen to it. This is the kind of track that makes a person so glad music even exists. The melodies alone are absolutely invigorating, but even more so is a wild and vibrant drum work starting from literally its first seconds. It's got this unique amalgamation of jazz and pop that do a little dance along its run, but unexpectedly, it's also got a bit of a Latin flavor to it I can't fully place. Maybe I'm wrong, but in any case, I absolutely cannot stop moving along to this with each and every listen. Hasegawa's warm, pillowy vocals have become such a comfort quality for myself. They're just intoxicating. Second place goes to all the strange little creature noises seemingly stuffed into every spare crevices that'll fit them. It's all so very cute. It's a song that's rightfully hell-bent on creating an entire universe all its own, and it's so rare to find music that possesses this much untethered life to it. If this sounds good to you, I so highly recommend Mahagako with every cell of my being. Watch my album Spotlight to learn more. Or just wait a couple more months. Your choice.
Well, sometimes I go out by myself and I look across the water.
So, I'm no musician, but sometimes I sincerely wonder how it must feel to have a song of yours essentially stolen away from you by way of someone else absolutely dominating their own rendition. I mean, Trent Reznor basically acknowledged this regarding Johnny Cash's version of Hurt, and okay, I'm just saying that the Zootons must have felt pretty awkward after this cover. Seriously though, I of course am talking about the amazing Amy Winehouse, who sings Valerie with her delectable combo of sweet croons and strong vocal runs that make this tune shine like a diamond. Though I guess technically this is Mark Ronson's track too, and his arrangements of retro horns, strings, and percussion bring such a great ambience to the track, like Phil Spector meets Town Called Malice. Winehouse and Ronson are, of course, no stranger to collabs, as heard in the fantastic Back to Black. However, while the deeply melancholic work on that album is some of Winehouse's best, Valerie is especially notable in that bright, girlish energy about her performance. This alone just makes my heart swell with every listen. Also, it's simply just a damn good, sticky pop song. Always a plus.
I tried going against my own soul's wall.
Oh man, so this is one of the most frustrating cases of a great tier song in excellent tier clothing. Still pretty awesome though. Gonna do a weird thing and start this review with a complaint. This song is a bit too baggy. Like, man, it sure does take a solid minute before actually doing anything, doesn't it? And once it does start, well, the song's about a third done already. Real frustrating tune, this one. And it's frustrating because, well, what we do have here is absolutely stupendous. A soaring slice of Heartland rock with keys and guitars that head for the hills. Brandon Flowers sounding so impassioned, almost to the point of breathlessness. To be clear though, yeah, this song is full-on Springsteen worship. Like, this song wants to be Born to Run so badly. But sure, yeah, there are certainly worse songs to take inspiration from. In any case, the meaning of this tune relates to Flowers' spirituality, constantly referencing that one path toward the holy devotion that bids him toward a fulfilling life. His struggle to find this path is ongoing, lifelong even, and is epitomized here as a test from God to lead him toward this righteous way. Admittedly, I am not particularly inclined toward this religious reading. However, I can still relate to the sentiment of one's search for self-fulfillment and, well, meaning in this thing called life. And I do think the song is textured enough that one could draw from it any such connections to their own personal struggles, spiritual or otherwise. We're not all searching for God, but many of us are still searching for ourselves, and that can be even more daunting. Yet, if my own soul's warning is any indication, the journey can also be absolutely exhilarating. Even if all we do is fail and fail again, there is joy and thrill in the act of trying alone, and maybe that's what all this is about anyway. Don't listen to me though, I just like the shiny Springsteen sounds. Outside of worrying, I know next to nothing else about Welsh act The Joy Formidable, but if this tune is any indication, man do I need to start looking into them. This feels to me like a direct descendant from the Silver Sun pickup sound, so we're already at a great start. Even so, this song is, at first, deceptively simple. A steady drum beat, simple melodies, lyrics that read as total nonsense. It's a perfectly pleasant slice of indie rock, but if you know this song, you know that this isn't really what's put it up this high. Yes, here we are. That prolonged instrumental that makes up the meat of the song is where the magic of worrying really lies. A churning, spiraling wall of noise slowly fleshes out. The edges of the guitar blur to obscurity by the fuzz of its textures. All of this kept in line by that drum beat. And then it all breaks down. The guitars drop like a pounding hammer onto the cemented environment. And even still, it keeps swelling, larger and more imperceptible, like the song will burst at any moment. We've escaped Silver Sun Pickups territory and now entered the sonic youth zone. It's oh so indulgent. Chaotic, sure, but a controlled chaos, and oh so groovy. It's an absolute lightning in a bottle experience, and I'm glad to have stumbled upon it. You know, sometimes I love big, violent walls of guitar noise, and other times, I just want to dance. I swear to dog, French house might secretly be one of the best genres of all time, and more varied than one would think. There's no way that you're mistaking this one for a Daft Punk or a Justice track, that much is certain. I've always loved this song, and not unlike the ways I love a lot of late 90s and early 2000s dance music. There's just something so uniquely special about that era, a colorful, youthful weightlessness to it all. Lady Hear Me Tonight is very clearly a product born and bred from Eurodance, but with a certain degree of artfulness that could have only come from this inner human desire to express oneself in much more personal, distinct ways. I don't know, I'm just rambling. Music rocks, man. All of this is a complicated way to describe what is an extremely uncomplicated song. It's just got a single repeated verse, sung in this drab, ambiguously European accent that I can't help but find so charming. And there's something so effortlessly cool about this casual melody. I feel like it could have been drawn from any number of pop or R&B jams today, reconfigured for something more sweaty and vibrant. All this led along by that infectious guitar lick, pounding dance beats, and the absolute sickest bass riff. I'm never not in a great mood every time I listen to this. It's been one of my top tier dance tracks for many years, and it will continue to be for quite some time to come. Summer nights truly can last forever. Yeah, let's just keep the energy going.
Baby, you're all that I want when you're lying here in my arms.
Oh man, we're on a roll with these great transformative covers, aren't we? I'm not sure which version of Heaven is most popular to my viewers, but I, for one, was first familiar with this version as a kid. I still really like the original, though. It's clearly one of the best Bryan Adams songs ever, almost certainly his best ballad. And at a glance, the jump from the song's origins as an intimate arena ballad to a much more up-tempo staple of radio-friendly vocal trance doesn't really make a ton of sense. But I mean, given the song's strongest qualities, yeah, it kinda does. This has always been a really good chorus, and amping up the exuberance to levels of cool flashiness, it's a stroke of brilliance. The song may feel less intimate, but the outpouring of emotions are that much larger and resonant as a result. Helps too that they got a much better singer here, and the way that these light percussive elements and pianos trace along the vocals in build-up toward that cathartic chorus, it's just fantastic. The The artists have effectively taken a song that was, at the end of the day, just another decent power ballad and transformed it into a classic to span many more generations. It's now a song that's bigger than life itself, and that's just great. Again, I'd like to thank my friends for making this the furriest subscriber special yet. Once again, from the top, Bandetto is one of many alternate names for Emma Essex, a producer who makes music under a large variety of anthropomorphic aliases, each of them specializing in their own set of dance genres. In the case of Bandetto, well, we've got an experimental breakcore and gabber type tune given to us by a pool toy dog creature. Fair enough. Not many people know this about me, but I am very much a raver kid at heart. My dumb brain won't let me go to any actual raves, but boy do I love the music. And I'm mostly just glad that I Want to Be a Hippie isn't the only form of gabber representation in these subspecials. That one is cool, but Pleasure Animals is a special kind of fun. And, well, as much as I love picking apart and analyzing music, I do understand that sometimes that isn't so necessary. Sometimes all we need are some good feral grooves, and that's exactly what Pleasure Animals is. I just feel so loose and free when I experience all these ridiculous silly turns, from the opener, which I swear is a chopped up Calvin Harris rip, to the fun little vocal samples that tell the true thesis of this song so well.
Women, pleasure, animals. Men, pleasure, animals. Women, pleasure.
To that other sample, which just makes too much goddamn sense. To the ending, which drives it home in its escalating, heart-pounding glory. It's music that absolutely does not take itself nor its listeners too seriously. All Bandetto can do here is express itself as openly as it sees fit, and it's up to the rest of us to let go of our inhibitions and join along for the ride. Yeah, I went ahead and picked this song apart anyway, didn't I? Some things will never change.
I wanna try that pill that people take.
God, yes, am I so glad that this song got in the subspecial. They Say Vision tends to come up in personal conversations about songs that really should have been bigger hits than they actually were. Honestly, Rez should have been a household name in 2001. At least y'all know her name now.
Take my hand and lead me where you wanna. Say no mind what you think is in his eyes.
This is incredibly cool. From the light and airy melodies to the slightly dark tones of those guitars. I think it's tempting to lump Rez in with that style of textured pop rock that artists like Pink were popularizing this day. But there's a soulfulness to her vocals, both in her leads and in the backups, that is so distinct. Kinda has a Fleetwood Mac feel to it even.
I play the joker sometimes, but then those moments fly back my way.
And the song's uniqueness is fitting for its message that emphasizes the importance of personal self-expression. Society has confined us into these tiny little boxes that dictate what to do, what to say, how to do it all. Rez, on the other hand, imagines a world where this may not be the case, where we can navigate outside these boxes and become stronger and so much happier in the process. Certainly a more relatable topic for me nowadays, mature and sophisticated in all the most admirable ways. I'll continue to love this for the rest of my days. It took me so long to come around to this one, but my God, does it hit.
It's not the long flowing dress that you're in, or the light.
Now, I've been aware of the song for a while. It has now been pretty cemented as one of Jason Isbell's finest songs, and it's not hard to see why. Though it's pretty simple in its acoustic country stylings, the poetry contained within is particularly poignant. It's a love song, sure, but one that pays special attention to the ephemerality of life itself.
It's knowing that this can't go on forever.
Isbell knows that one day he and his beloved will be forced apart by the natural tides of things. And yet, rather than dwell on the frightening morbidity of this, he instead illustrates an absurdist fantasy of he and his lover as vampires, unconcerned with the death that will never come for them.
And laugh at all the lovers and their plans.
This dream is enticing at first. Aging is no issue, and they'll never have to endure the painful experience of mourning. He never has to hold her hand out of fear of her slipping away. And yet, doesn't that negate what makes a loving experience so special?
Maybe we'll get 40 years together, but one day I'll be gone.
And this is where the song has been lately hitting differently. So this past July, me and my partner Malcolm celebrated our 10-year anniversary together. It's been really fun, and I'm looking forward to spending a lot more of it with him. Concurrently though, he will likely be the person I spend the rest of my life with. Or the other way. I could potentially only be around for the rest of his life. One day, one of us will leave this world by forces beyond our control, and just the idea that he could be out of my life is unthinkable. Even worse is the possibility that I'll leave him alone to grieve.
Maybe time running out is a gift.
Nonetheless, it's by paying mind to these inevitabilities that make all these finite days feel all that more precious. For every day that passes marks us closer to the time where one day I'll be gone, or one day he'll be gone. So we may as well hold tight while we still can. And it's a monument to the power of If We Were Vampires that a tune so gentle and unassuming can nonetheless also be so rich and poignant.
Likely one of us will have to spend some days alone. Maybe we'll...
This weight is all that more emphasized by Isbell singing with his real-life partner, Amanda Shires, their duetting vocals bringing a great deal of stunning intimacy to the track, but never in a way that removes it from the deep-seated realities that these words possess. Death is a gift, and as long as we have each other, this time together can be a most beautiful present indeed. Okay, well that was something. Let's get back to having some fun with some college radio classics now.
I like your twisted point of view, Mike.
The Magnetic Fields' 69 Love Songs is a nice album. Honestly, any number of those tracks would have been great inclusions here, but also honestly, I'm so glad Papa Was a Rodeo was the one. The sleepy honky-tonk rhythms and wailing guitar leads suggest a country ballad costuming, and yet Stephen Merritt's distinguished baritone brings something a bit weirder to the table.
I see that kiss me pucker forming.
Certainly echoed by his role of a character unraveling his baggage onto a potential bar hookup, bringing up these markers of dysfunction to persuade the other person to not fall for him. This was always one of my favorites off the album. Merritt has a fascinating way of describing such simple sentiments with some darkly humorous poetry that is just so fun to follow along with.
Never stuck around long enough for a one-night stand.
His drabness is almost pathetic, and yet gives credence to his words and makes him a strangely sympathetic protagonist as a result. It is, again, just so fascinating.
And now it's 55 years later.
The final verse reveals that, well, they found compatibility in their baggage and have spent many happy years together. It's kinda corny, but I'm nothing if not a hopeless romantic, if that weren't obvious enough. And the thought of these two broken people who can surpass each other's dysfunctions in the name of love is just adorable. Weird romance stories are always appreciated around these parts.
Everyone safe and sound, this our family do.
Every subscriber special is better with clipping. Anyway, Nothing Is Safe projects for us a scenario ripped straight from a horror movie. The group at the center are deep in hiding from a malicious force, soon revealed to be the police.
Bullets of an antibody cop running up in the spot, the pop, drop, the lights are drop.
And that alone presents a brilliant take on what is, in actuality, an all too common lived reality for many black folks. I may not share this lived reality, but I sure do know my horror movies. And of course, the best kind of horror stories are those presented with shades of the real world contained within. George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, for example, has been commonly interpreted as a metaphor for the civil rights movement, with the horrifying imagery of grotesque violence closely mirroring what was seen on TV screens and newspapers of the day. And truthfully, what clipping is doing here isn't all that far removed from what filmmakers like Jordan Peele have navigated within their own scene. Sure, the evocative imagery within Get Out could chill damn near anyone to the bone, but the specificity contained for black viewers only further builds upon these already grisly situations.
Furniture, low walls, barricade you inside. Lose the lights in the hallways every...
This is all to say that Nothing Is Safe is tense as hell, and in a way that unmistakably borrows from horror cinema. That reverberating piano line, coupled with the softly ominous bass trembling beneath, brings to mind the similar coldness of a John Carpenter score. So much focus is placed on the deceptive silence that hides much more than it reveals.
Barely had to summon what was coming, it was creeping on the come up that was right up in your face. Face it, let it resonate up in your...
And yet, what it hides soon comes into full view as the synths swell to their full power, and David Diggs' once restrained bars now spring fully to life. And what he describes is this overblown violence filling the entire frame as we are now face to face with that which we can all recognize, the paralyzing fear of death.
Death is coming for you, but you already knew that. Thought the clicker brought you some.
It's coming for us all, and there's nothing we can do to stop it. Nothing is safe. Leave it to clipping to consistently strike fear into the hearts of this lowly listener, always leaving one hell of an impression as they do.
So you think I'm alone, but being alone.
Janelle Monáe is just incredible, and the Archandroid is a game changer of an album. I, of course, have always adored War of the Roses, and while Cold War was always passed around as another one of their early masterpieces, it's taken me way too long to see its mastery. But goddamn was I missing out. At its core, it's a skillful combination of art rock and R&B, with a confident bombast of its electronic foundation, and, of course, Monáe's powerful voice slicing through it all. Though I do see how this was a harder sell for me. Absent is a wild punkish energy of War of the Roses as this song seeks to look inward, accentuating the uncomfortable truths that come with asserting one's individuality. Like They Say Vision, the song embraces the thrill in living outside the box, but it also confronts the alienation and even loneliness that comes with this territory. Having pride in one's self-worth is fulfilling for sure, but the rest of the world may not be so welcoming. And sometimes, it could simply be too much to handle. It's a message that I figure would particularly resonate with Monáe's audience of black women, but, well, it also connects to queerness, gender nonconformity, practically any alternative identity we undertake to find our own special meaning in life. And there's a certain tragedy to this, certainly implicated in Monáe's performance, how their voice sometimes cracks ever so slightly at the corners. And yet, Cold War also refuses to wallow in this darkness for too long. In fact, it absolutely triumphs in spite of it all. The moment Monáe calls out to their guitar player is an absolute highlight in a song already filled with exhilarating highs. It's so good. This has been a really fine source of empowerment for me these past few months, and I'm glad I can finally say I love it so much. Yeah, see, a big reason why this video has taken so long to finish is y'all just gave me such interesting material to work with. And that's not stopping yet. First of all, rest in peace, Steve Albini. Interestingly enough, as vocal up a Nirvana fan I've been through the years, this is the first time any of their songs have come into a subscriber special, and what an interesting one to start with. A lesser known album cut from In Utero. My personal favorite of the band's records. If you know Nirvana, you know what you're getting into here. Scuzzy guitar, heavy bass, pounding drums, and the frayed, tattered vocals of Kurt Cobain. But I do want to pay special mind to the song's title, as this makes a direct reference to that which would define the last parts of Cobain's life, his affinity for actress Frances Farmer. Farmer is likely best known for the tragically inhumane treatment she received while under the care of psychiatric medical professionals in the city of Seattle, which effectively impaired her throughout the rest of her short life. Our favorite patient, displaying patience. Likewise, well, I'm far from the first to mention that Cobain's relationship with the media had grown increasingly hostile at this point. Therefore, I can't help but read the acerbic lyricism of the song, absolutely rich in his signature sentiments of intense irony, as a dense parallel to Farmer's dehumanization at the hands of those who were assigned to help her. I miss the comfort in being sad is such a hard-hitting line, demonstrating a moment of painful regret under the relentless eye of scrutiny. It's a song riddled in paranoia, a condemnation of the public dehumanization toward Cobain, who, for all intents and purposes, was just an ordinary troubled person, completely ill-fit for superstardom. And it's within this song that he finds and expresses his own comfort, if only for a short amount of time. He can feel again, and this is something that the abuses of the authoritarian strongholds can never take away. Alright, that last one got pretty heavy. How do we get the ball rolling again?
Some people think little girls should be seen and not heard, but I think, oh, bondage! Up yours! 1, 2, 3, 4!
Well, that's one way. Yes, women! Oh Bondage Up Yours has been an incredible anthem of punkish self-expression for half my life. I've connected with it to a near spiritual degree, probably more than any other punk song I've heard in my life. Obviously, polystyrene is a huge reason for that. Her voice is just so brash and bombastic, a performance entirely within its own genre. And the song is also very unique, thanks to not just the vocals, but the cool as hell backing and interludes given by Laura Logic's discordant saxophone. We also get a powerful message at its center, one that uses the imagery of bondage to declare how we are all slaves in our own way. Slaves to capitalism, hell, even slaves to gender. It's an anthem of anti-materialism that doubles as a shrill rallying cry during a time when female representation in punk was few and far between. It forcefully spits in the face of belittlement and objectification, an aggressive refusal of the male gaze, which, yeah, discomforting men is my kink, and this is everything to me. It's loud, outspoken, fun as hell, and a predecessor to the goddamn Riot Girl movement by at least 10 years. Absolutely nothing not to love here.
New York, I love you, but you're bringing me down.
LCD Sound System, a group I really loved a lot in college, but haven't revisited in several years. Any number of their beloved tunes would have done well here, so it's especially interesting that this one got in.
Like a rat in a cage, pulling minimum wage.
Unlike the majority of their dance punk standards, New York, I Love You lies very strictly in ballad territory, as James Murphy and gang perform a plaintive waltz to the place they love. Their home city, which they are as spiritually connected to as they are deeply saddened by.
New York, you're perfect, oh please don't change a thing.
And let me tell you, as someone who has also had a love-hate relationship with my own city for the past decade plus, this hits hard. It's a common feeling, living out your days and years in a place you call home and watching it change all around you, perhaps to the point of unfamiliarity. Meanwhile, you yourself have changed. Perhaps for the better, but who's really to say?
But you're still the one pool where I'd happily drown.
And it's not until doing my replays for this video did I realize that, well, I even feel similarly toward LCD Sound System themselves in some way. My move away from home happened to coincide with my increasing passion for music, and they just happened to be one of the first bands I really got into. As such, I deeply associate them with this particular time in my life, although, well, like I said, not nearly as much these days. So strangely enough, this song has come to symbolize all the ways that I have changed and grown as a person, which does include all the ways I continue to struggle and deteriorate, but that's alright, I'm only human after all. I think after all these years, the one line that has resonated the most with me is, "You're still the one pool I would happily drown," which might describe my own love-hate relationship with myself more than any other song has. It's just a grand masterwork of a song, with one of the best climaxes of the band's whole career. Looking forward to revisiting this one many more times throughout my life. Couldn't imagine a better way to close off this tier. It's Jeff, the guy with the impeccable knack for keeping his finger on the pulse of the world during these trying times, honestly expressing it all through his music, his bleeding heart oozing on his sleeve for all to see. Even with that said, Graveyard Song was never an immediate favorite of mine from Hell Mode, certainly not as much as Doubt or 3 Summers. As it stands though, it's a tremendous grower, one of the best songs here, I am certain. Immediately, we are granted the familiar scenario, waking up to the latest atrocity of the day, which is only bound to be replaced soon thereafter, tweaking yet somehow desensitized, building up a force field of numbness as a defense mechanism from the casual trauma. And though the act of wallowing in our misery is tempting, Graveyard Song is clearly more interested in picking ourselves up from the mess. We watch the world burn and feel powerless to do much for it all. Yet what we can do is make our lives more tolerable in those smaller ways. Cutting out the toxic people in our lives who feed into this negativity with no intention to change.
Building bridges, everybody start digging.
Of course, with the rise of right-wing supremacy and increasingly louder backlash against marginalized groups, this is something many of us are well and familiar with. An interview Rosenstock gave with Anthony Fantano basically confirmed my suspicions that this sentiment was at least partially aimed at transphobes.
People can't get behind like addressing people with their preferred pronouns. And in my mind, a lot of it's just like, what the fuck do you care? Like, let somebody be happy. Let somebody be themselves. Like, why the fuck do you care?
Going back to the song, well, Rosenstock has always been excellent at climaxes, and this falls among the best of his career, hammering in the fact that there are few more important things you can do for yourself than take control of your happiness, which is an absolute commodity in this world. Public shootings, climate change, bigoted politicians, God man, there's already so much to stress about. For anyone who needs to hear this, you have no obligation to be a friend to anyone who only exists in your life to suck your energy dry. You don't even have to be nice to them. Literally nothing in the world is worth more than your own well-being. If someone causes pain, it's okay to push them away. And now we have a song for that. A damn good one at that.
Dearly beloved.
Likewise, I couldn't imagine a better way to open this tier. Prince is incredible because Prince is Prince. And just in case you somehow thought that the title track was the only terrific part about Purple Rain, well, no, obviously it starts incredible as well. Wow. In conversations about the best album openers of all time, Let's Go Crazy is considered one of the best, and for damn good reason. Just listen to that organ-led intro, with Prince himself escorting listeners into a eulogy to a little thing called life. But while we still got it, let's just make the best of it, and dance the freaking night away. This song is, according to the artist, a metaphor for Christianity, and nestled within these lyrics is a plea for listeners to take the right path and not fall into the clutches of the devil. Honestly, I don't care much about the elusive evangelism. I just love the song because it's a jam and a half. It's one of the best examples of that good old Minneapolis sound, with its fierce, energetic dance rhythms and inflections of electric guitar that bring an unexpected heaviness to the whole track. And speaking of guitar, man can this guy absolutely shred. If those opening seconds are musical gold, the final guitar solo is pure platinum. I've gushed enough about how terrific of a performer Prince was, enough for several lifetimes, but I don't know. Dude deserves all the praise for his unconventional artistry and star power like no one else. There really was no one else quite like him, yeah. Alright, the jig is up. Vampire Empire is not my favorite song off this album. This one is.
You and I both know there is nothing.
This is Adrienne Lenker's masterpiece. I mean, sure, she has released plenty of great solo output, and there are even Big Thief cuts that I definitely prefer more. Even still, it's hard to listen to the song and not feel like this is what her whole career has been building up to.
Snow falling, I try to keep from.
It's replete with tender, desolate guitar strums that float around the soft violins, cascading outward like they were on some lonely dance floor. Meanwhile, those gentle piano chords fill the frame behind it all. And then there's Lenker herself, who is, God, just so good.
Leaning on the windowsill, you could write me someday and I bet you.
At its core, it's a heartbreak song that so masterfully tapped into the enormity of losing someone you'd imagine you'd spend the rest of your life with. As the many moments trickle by, the vastness of time together is tremendously obscured, and we can never fully recognize it. And then they're gone, and all these wasted years suddenly hit full force, like a limb being violently pulled from one's body.
And you showed me a place I'll find, even when I'm old.
But as in with If We Were Vampires, these endings can be enlightening, and this song is a tender reminder to cherish each moment as it comes, view them as important and profound before they become a nostalgic memory within which you can no longer exist. Sadness is painful, but it, like death, is also a gift, allowing us to recognize the enormity of the tides as they shift below our feet.
We could see the sadness as a gift and still feel too heavy to hold.
And then we let go of the sadness, because this is what we must do to grow, to eventually love again. Overall, it's one of the warmest, biggest hugs in song form I've discovered in a while, and I'm keeping it around for a long time to come.
A candy-colored clown they call the Sandman tiptoes to my room.
More oldies in my subspecials, please?
Is all right. I close my eyes, then I drift away.
Yeah, like it or not, I think I will always be an old head at heart. There's little else that pleases me more than digging into the distinct backlog of recorded music and pulling out the shiniest of gems. And In Dreams stands among the very best.
Tiptoes to my room every night.
Roy Orbison had one of the best voices of all time, possessing this deep, smoky baritone that expresses sadness and heartbreak in ways that feel near apocalyptic in its emotional grandeur. These opening lines alone are absolutely intoxicating, after which it builds into a tender country sway, with a vaguely Latin flavor to its guitar-driven shuffle and violin embellishments.
In dreams, I walk with you.
It's lush, gorgeous, and ever so slightly dark around the edges. The premise is simple. Orbison falls asleep and floats around in his personal dreamland, wherein he can coexist happily with his beloved. And then he awakens to find that this is only a dream. In the waking world, she doesn't love him, and all he can do is lament over what could never actually, truly come to be.
I can't help it, I can't help it, if I...
It's a song with all the trite simplicity one would expect from this era's pop music, but also with this distinct air of mysticism and even surreality, which is something that surely came to the mind of David Lynch and company upon its use in the pivotal scene for the film Blue Velvet. The song already lends itself to a dark, vaguely discomforting mood. That scene simply makes that final push over the edge. Orbison spends much of the song's final moments enveloped in that overwhelming sadness that accompanies heartache, wailing out to anyone that can hear him. It ends abruptly on such a note, with little conclusion to draw upon except the blank coldness of his lonely existence. Thus is the harshness of reality, I suppose. Gotta admit, I've never been the biggest car seat headrest fan. Bodies, though, is unquestionably my favorite of their songs. And if you know me, this should come as absolutely no surprise.
But that's not what I wanted to say at all.
Rich, emotional indie rock instrumentation bolstered by the powerful lyricism of Will Toledo, all fantastically building toward an anthemic as hell climax. Yeah, that's the good stuff. Now, I've actually never listened to the 2011 lo-fi version of Twin Fantasy, although I've given the original recording of Bodies a few spins, and, well, I guess the biggest drawback is that I've simply known the re-recording for that much longer, so familiarity bias is a thing.
Everybody is swinging their hips. Everybody is giving the way.
But even still, I'm just way more inclined toward the slicker sound and fuller power pop instrumentation here. Also helps that Toledo's lyrics are way more legible, as that's always been one of the song's high points. Much respect to the Leonard Cohen reference for sure.
This one has grown old and bitter.
And at its its core, the song tackles a wide range of emotions that might not be so easy to get across, namely, the conventional knowledge that we, as humans, are so very fragile. Even our most prosperous moments can be toppled down at a moment's notice, just by virtue of an unpredictable existence. And Bodies tries to capture this fact of life in a special moment of unity with the human body as a whole. All of us hanging by our own individual threads, just trying our damnedest to get through each day any way we can.
When we're dead.
For at the end of the day, our bodies could indeed give out at any moment, and our flames will, inevitably, be snuffed out forever someday. Thus, we owe it to ourselves to just grab onto life by its shaky handles and hold on to dear life, with the solace that we never have to do it alone. Overall, it's, again, a great bit of life-affirming indie rock, and I love it so much. Yeah, sure, have another one from these guys.
Words like violence break the silence.
Not gonna lie, I feel like I just reviewed the song. Okay, it has been over 2 hours, but you know what I mean. Yeah, it's another one of the big Violator singles, the one that directly precedes Policy of Truth and Fact. This one's a stone cold classic though. And yeah, there isn't much in Enjoy the Silence we haven't seen before. The moody synths, the fascinating vocals, the overarching gothic quality of it all. Nonetheless, yeah, I really liked Policy of Truth, but this is on a whole other caliber. This hook, for one, is an absolute killer. It's as dusky and sensual as it is remarkably catchy. Same goes for that main synth riff, layered plentifully upon these ghostly choir sounds and wide melodic washes. I loved this impeccably dark, moody atmosphere as a kid, and even still to this day. It's again, not a track I listen to much for its lyrics, but there's a bit more meat on its bones here. Amidst a world full of pain and displeasure, staying still with your beloved just to feel the moment and relish in the act of existence itself might just be enough to keep strong through it all. I've long heard the drug interpretations of the song, and frankly, I don't buy any of them. It's a very blunt and direct tune at its core. No need to extrapolate any further meaning that isn't there. There are a lot of great moments, but I want to give it up to that ending climax, which melts together all of its electronic elements and includes a new sound: horns. Synthetic horns, sure, but as gothic as this environment is, we now get a renewed sense of triumph, even positivity in the mix. It's kind of an incredible song. I don't even know what else to say. Yeah, we're just gonna fire off on some more obviously great stuff now. It's about time I got to reviewing this one.
I know the version of me. Is she perverted like me? Would she go?
Well, hello again, Alanis. Although head over feet, this is not. Jagged Little Pill may have a good deal of delightful tracks that show off Morissette's knack at spirited poetry, but this is absolutely not delightful. Though it certainly is spirited.
And I'm here to remind you of the mess.
Taken at face value, this is already quite the fantastic kiss-off to a no-good dirty ex who did her wrong, undertaking a post-grunge outfit to make her scathing words really stick. The instrumentals to this track are particularly great, led by some bombastic drum work, Eastern stylized guitar, and some funky-as-hell bass licks. And yet, it's Morissette who takes center stage, with her typically sweet melodic vocals shifting to total venomous acerbity. And, well, context is key. Morissette has remarked repeatedly about her experience being groomed during the early parts of her career, often interacting with much older men and dating one of them for a spell. And it's often only with the gift of hindsight can one realize that such a relationship is as toxic as they come.
You seem very well.
She was still rather young when she wrote this song, perhaps newly in the process of realizing what had happened, like a fresh wound that seems to grow larger the longer it heals. And in the midst of such hurtful confusion, yeah, the anger and compulsive behavior here feels entirely justified. She's intensely pissed, not only at the fact that he walked away with little regard for her feelings, but with the realization that this would affect her most negatively. And he sure as hell knew that. It is, to me, one of the most biting presentations of a victim reclaiming their own agency, as loud and messy as they see fit. It's totally profound in its fiery portrayal of such curdled feelings, and I will always respect it for that. Helps that it's just one firecracker of a tune as well. At last, Absolution has entered the building. After reviewing 2 tracks from Black Holes and Revelations, I am so happy to finally dive a bit into what is absolutely Muse's best album, Do Not At Me. And Hysteria might also be the first Muse song I'd ever heard. I'd like to throw in the central bass riff to Hysteria into conversation as one of the best of all time. Its heavily synthesized sound makes for such a fantastic header. Immediately, the track is wrapped in this dense and grimy energy that forms a backbone for the entire rest of the track, giving it all a slightly unsettling feeling that is absolutely intoxicating. And through it all, we get a type of avalanche. Riffs piled atop tremendous riffs, with an intense pounding atmosphere as a spearhead, and Matt Bellamy's fluid theatrical vocals tying it all together. This honestly just rocks, really freaking hard. It's as plain and simple as that. And it's a track about a wildly obsessive love. Perhaps more obsession than love, certainly a special kind of paranoia, which fits with the heaviness contained within. It's violent, but very sneakily so, more present in its huge folds of sound than anything outwardly spoken. From my viewpoint, it takes the subtly neurotic nature of the Roy Orbison song and dials it up to the sensibilities of 2000s rock listeners. Not quite as fitting for a David Lynch movie, sure, but it's a fine rocker all the same. A blast of electric paranoia right to the face, and also the gut, and it is so very delicious. I continue to emphasize that Muse were just so very good. While we're at it, you know who else ruled the 2000s? Again, 3 cheers for Sweet Revenge rules, y'all. At this rate, I'm well on the way to reviewing every song from the 2 big My Chemical Romance albums, which, sure, yeah, why not? Although, those who have been with me long enough might remember that, yeah, I already reviewed this one. But that video is so old. I could do a much better job now. If there's anything that My Chemical Romance are great at, it's the emotions. The emotions, if you will. And Helena is nothing if not a spiky, outward-shooting barrage of emotion, heard in the rip-roaring guitar, rhythmic drumming, and those wild, flailing vocals. And given that this was directly inspired by the death of Gerard and Mikey Way's grandmother, it seeks to portray that very raw, messy part of the grieving process, and does so quite compellingly. The enormity contained within is like all 5 stages of grief melted together into a giant ball of bitter confusion. The mournfulness here is palpable, but even more so is the burning anger at its core, the self-destructive thoughts that often accompany such turmoil. And yet, even in its most confused moments, it maintains its composure just enough to come through as an incredibly catchy bit of pop punk. One of the very best, in fact. Even after all these years, this bridge is still one of the major standouts, so very cold and ghostly, and Gerard Way's shaky vocals are so gripping, like an attempt to transcend the waking world into a final moment of desperation. Overall, it's extremely resonant as a coping mechanism in the wake of one's death, and a pretty striking tune all its own. So long and good night. As much as Nirvana really meant a lot to me in my formative years, I'd also hold a similar level of respect toward Hole, particularly their album Live Through This. The 90s grunge sound helmed by an almost all-female band and a singer who simply goes hard as hell? Sign me up. Doll Parts is one of the major standouts, where their typically loud and erratic energy is dialed all the way back as a sentimental ballad. Courtney Love's singing is so harsh and visceral, her vocals trembling along only a merely recognizable melody. It's incredibly potent in its deliberate imperfection, and whether I knew it or not, I think there was something in the raw power of her performance especially that really spoke to that deep insecurity I felt for damn near my entire life. Someday you will ache like I ache. The song itself expresses the speaker's admiration they feel for the person they're romantically into, an admiration that mutates to a darker kind of self-loathing. And the nihilism captured in these sentiments is so perceptible. Love sings about dolls, pulling them apart bit by bit with her own words, and envisioning herself as these plastic fragmented parts, devoid of life and warmth.
I am doll parts.
It's a spare, dismal environment, likely one of the most harrowing depictions of depression I've ever heard in a song. And considering the, well, darker subtextual elements at play here, the somber tone of this one feels just that much more real. A deep plunge into darkness and grief, from which there seems no escape.
You will ache like I ache. Someday.
And it all culminates to that arresting climax, incredibly bitter in its outpouring of emotion, yet also pretty damn cathartic. Her ache is so great she can no longer keep it contained, and the way the louder guitars mesh beautifully with her ragged screams, it still gives me chills every single time. An absolute classic in 90s grunge, and one that still greatly impacts me to this very day. Question: what do you call it when a 90s band of the space rock genre takes two incredibly poignant vocal lines, plays them on a loop alongside each other through the nostalgic filter of a radio station crackle, lines them alongside one of the most familiar, emotionally resonant melodies of classical music, throws in an increasing range of orchestral percussion and swelling guitars, and ties it all together with a full-bodied choir singing the hook to one of the most recognizably beautiful love songs of all time? Well, I call it cheating personally, but details. Spiritualize are a band I never really thought a ton about, but I can't deny that Ladies and Gentlemen, We Are Floating in Space is their masterpiece. The one track wherein they fire off every bit of energy at their disposal for one brief but unforgettable moment. It's just gorgeous, from the very first seconds to the last. I don't think it's the greatest song of all time or anything, but I wouldn't blame others for coming to this conclusion with how grand it sounds. I know I used that big old word salad at the intro, but that doesn't even touch upon how impeccable its production is. The sound is incredibly spacious at the start, with various elements trickling in little by little to form a perfect full build. The looping vocals of the tune genuinely feel like they could last forever, and honestly, sometimes I wish they would. The frame is never cluttered though. On the contrary, it's as if these sounds somehow circumvent the mix and aim straight for the heart, making it a spiritual, experience entirely. Most importantly though, yeah, words can only do so much. This is one you gotta actually experience for yourself. You should go ahead and do that right now. Well, after this video is done. What do we really have in this wide and ruthless world, if not community?
Well, I just wanna go to work and get back home.
Hooray for the Riff Raps' The Navigator was an album that really captivated me back in 2017. It's a record that pulls from traditions of musical theater to create art that grapples with the trying times in which we live today. And the centerpiece is its penultimate track, Pa'lante, which is just plain beautiful.
Colonized and hypnotized, be something.
Alinda Segarra's voice is as soft and comforting as it is fierce and commandeering. A fighter for working class liberation and also a friend, a family member. They present a mini odyssey of sorts, expressing their constant state of struggle against a relentless world. It's tense, gripping, and also so incredibly human.
Lately all my time's been moving slow.
The middle section breathes a bit of life into the tune, presenting a glimmer of hope in the face of it all. Indeed, Segarra wrote the song as a means to connect deeper with the identities they navigate as a Puerto Rico person with a background of struggle, addiction, and grief, particularly in the face of a looming right-wing rule. As such, we get a sense of urgency and understanding that now more than ever, it is crucial that we hold tight to our sense of self and keep our feet planted firmly in soil.
Dead Puerto Ricans who never knew they were Puerto Ricans, who never took a coffee break from the 10 Commandments.
We get an excerpt from Pedro Prieto's poem, Puerto Rican Obituary, which further ties the personal to the political, paying mind to the timeline of colonialism that has revealed itself in the generational oppression of the country's poor people of color, a kind of coercive oppression that is tough to shake.
From El Barrio to Arecibo, Palante.
And with that, the final verse gives us a natural conclusion from the pain. Revolution, community, solidarity, as these are the only ways that we can survive.
To all who lost their pride, I say, Palante.
Palante is a term that roughly translates to move forward, and here it is a motivational phrase of resistance and perseverance. The song expertly concentrates the centuries of communal struggle into 3 short and powerful acts, coming out of the other end a more complete, enlightened whole, an example we should all learn from. And as time marches forward and the tides continue to shift, I am certain that this will go down in history as something truly special indeed. Liz the old head strikes again.
That lonesome whip.
Yeah, I'm always going to have a special sort of love for the classics. At the end of the day, I'm a historian at heart, and I'm convinced that we have long perfected the act of transcribing every recognizable human emotion into recorded music, and everything else is just making their own copies of these. As far as full-bodied, soul-crushing sadness is concerned, what more do you need than this one, really?
I'm so lonesome I could cry.
I simply don't know how you listen to I'm So Lonesome I Could Cry and not consider it one of, if not the most melancholic song of all time. To ears less conditioned to the old country sound, yeah, it's pretty sparse, sure. And yet, what this song lacks in extravagant production, it absolutely makes up for in its stark, unabashed bleakness. You hear it in the sway of those weeping guitars and in Hank Williams' stunningly honest poetry.
The moon just went behind the clouds.
Williams was certainly no stranger to writing some of the most profound representations of love and heartbreak, but this song in particular feels like something richer. It's a song about, well, loneliness. The feeling of watching the entire world pass by while you could only sit still and deeply relate to the isolated qualities of the weeping birds and languid clouds.
Did you ever see a robin weep?
It's simple, but if you've ever felt this type of deep misery, it's also dreadfully familiar. A breakup narrative can be pulled from this, sure, but there's something more universal at play, I think. He wonders where they are, but he could be addressing damn near anyone. A lover, a friend, an almighty creator perhaps. Anyone to zap this hopelessness away and give his life some meaning.
And as I wonder where you are, I'm so lonesome.
As such, this may be the bleakest song on this entire list, and that's certainly saying something. Man. This sure has been a mighty dark hole we found ourselves in, folks. So why stop now?
Got 'em right between the shoulders.
Wednesday are a pretty solid band. With that said, Bull Believer might be the most unfair song to start off with them. What can I say? They might have been one of the greatest bands of all time if they had anything else quite as dark and compellingly raw as Bull Believer. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Bull Believer is a song in 2 parts, detailing singer Carly Hartzman's experience growing up in her small town, an upbringing speckled with hurt and darkness. The lyrics craft an analogy between a violent bullfight and the act of watching someone you love fall into the endless pit of addiction. All the while, MJ Lenderman's ominous guitar tones seem to foreshadow the grisly nature of what is to come. The second half of the song, however, reintroduces our characters at an earlier part in their lives, as children, hanging out and playing video games. Meanwhile, the sludgy instrumentals and haunting vocals seem to dance around this portrait of innocence, like a grim reaper biding its time to derail their lives. The song is a steady rocker at this point, save for the moment when the guitars disrupt Hartzman's crooning and screech into the mix, like the stabbing knife of a surprise killer. Truly, the downward spiral has only just begun, and we've got a long way to go. Then we reach the centerpiece of the song, the escalation of chilling guitars that spin around the mix like a tornado. Hartzman repeatedly whispers the phrase, "finish him," which soon becomes a croon, which soon becomes a wail. The steady rocker at this point has now become agonizing. Violent guitars that repeatedly pierce into the environment, building further in intensity as the vocalist turns to the visceral, simply lashing out the turmoil inside her. She encounters this wide destruction head on, like a matador to a bull, yet try as she might, she can never really rein it in, and it flails far beyond her control. All she can do now is scream. This climax never fails to chill me to the bone. It's an impressively layered portrait of dread and despair, and I can't wait to re-experience these horrors time and time again. Remember what I said about needing to know me really well to confidently give me songs from another form of media? Well, Malcolm's got me covered. Oh yes, here it is. The song that has haunted me for nearly 2 decades. Now, will this instrumental mean very much to those who have never engaged in the world of Twin Peaks? No, probably not. But do I care? Nah, I'm not interested in being objective in this ranking at all. I fucking love this one. This instrumental is the very first thing you hear upon entering the strange, surreal town of Twin Peaks, and it leaves a hell of an impression. In actuality, though, this theme is a repurposed version of Julie Cruz's single Falling, written by David Lynch and arranged by Angelo Badalamenti. So let's start there. Already, there's so much to love here. The layered synthesizers are truly gorgeous, but so is Cruz's voice, bringing an elevated ghostliness to the frame. Still, I remain indebted to the instrumental show theme. The openness and empty spaces are extremely perceptible, especially after knowing what has been removed to make it sound as it does. And without the vocals, we are left to focus on the escalating melody that drives the track, which is simply gorgeous. It has the feeling of a classical Beethoven sonata, yet one that is warped and twisted to match the uncanny valley nature of the show. I've made it no secret that I long struggled with instrumentals, but with this one, I get it. It's truly the kind of song that makes me want to simply close my eyes and ascend to the heavens. And it's also a very sad song, almost to remind us of the tragic murders central to the series' plot. And with both Badalamenti and Cruz having passed in recent years, this era morbidity is only that much more pronounced, like a dirge, a lament on one's passage to the unknowable afterlife, and also perhaps a reflection on the fleeting beauty of life itself. God damn.
We live on a mountain.
Here it is, the third Björk song I've covered in a subscriber special, and the second I've placed in my all-timers tier. Needless to say, I'm quite a fan, and Hyperballad in particular is one I've always carried around with me. I even talked about it in a past video. I love it a lot. Björk's sophomore album Post has such a gripping sound throughout its length, and you can hear a lot of it in Hyperballad alone. Along with co-producer Nelly Hooper, the artist builds a dense electronic environment from the ground up. We get a solid foundation of ambient music that guides us along the melody, but the soft percussion and accents of strings and laser-focused synths suggest a wider expanse before us. One so wide, we can't see the bottom.
I go through all this before.
Ultimately, it's a song about love and romance, but also intrusive thoughts. This speaker lives about her days on the mountaintop with her partner, yet is still occasionally driven toward destruction, seen in the morning she parts from her beloved to throw random objects off the cliff.
I listen to the sounds they make on their way down.
It's a childlike impulse, and yet it also gives a jarring contrast to the utopia of her surroundings, suggesting an air of cynicism deep inside her. This suggestion is, of course, driven to the forefront with her own impulsive curiosities of falling off the cliff herself.
And when it lands, will my eyes be closed or open?
It's a song that pulls out the human element from this fairy tale love story, insinuating the theory that no one person could completely drive away their dark thoughts. It's a song that is as effortlessly dreamy as it is dark as sin, working brilliantly to balance both of these moods into a gorgeous atmosphere into which I simply love getting lost. Most importantly though, it's cool as hell. The climactic moment where this bass-heavy dance beat suddenly shimmies its way into the mix, urging listeners to move their entire body along, I absolutely live for this. Our inner peace may be constantly disrupted, but as long as there is love, there is life, and we can make our own little heaven with the broken pieces inside of us, if we choose to do so. A spectacular piece of work, indeed. From one of the all-time best love songs, to one of the most passionate displays of heartbreak I've ever heard. Incredible. I can't really say I care for a ton of other material from Pearl Jam, although I am quite a fan of their debut album, 10. And yet, even beyond the instant classics in the tracklist, there really is nothing else quite like Black. A devastating portrait of a love lost to the elements, the sound of a limb being slowly amputated in real time. The guitar and bass starts off quiet and desolate, building in a deep intensity as we get a fuller picture of the romance, and how much the speaker has truly lost in its wake. Eddie Vedder's lyrics are pure poetry, attempting to portray with excruciating analogy just how much this other person has meant to him, how much the sun and the air seem to flash away in their absence.
How quick the sun can drive away.
The arrangement to this has all the heaviness of a grunge rocker, that much is undeniable. But what's particularly stunning about this is how incredibly pretty it is. Heard in the guitars that simply sear, and piano chords that instill a thicker dimension of heartfulness to the piece. Moreover, I know Vedder's growl of a voice has been the topic of jokes for decades, but one thing that can't be denied is that he's got a whole lot of character. And the various rasps and screams he gives throughout Black paint a vivid picture of someone so unthinkably distraught, it's nearly uncomfortable. Practically every line he sings feels utterly pained, as if he's been fully squeezed dry of tears at this point, yet continues to stretch to express his pain as much as humanly possible. Even when he comes to accept the truth and wish his ex-lover well, he can't help but brood upon the image of a life where they are no longer the center of his universe. After a certain point though, the poetry seizes itself. He could only say so much, and anything more is just coming back around to the start. Thus, he sings that final refrain into the lonely sunset, still as hurt as ever, but with the ever-active rotation of the earth urging him to move on, as we all must do. Again, one of the most honest, passionate displays of fresh heartache I've heard anywhere. Truly, truly remarkable. Yeah, one of these days, I'll be brave enough to actually put a Leonard Cohen song at number 1. I've gotta tread lightly with this one, though.
4 o'clock in the afternoon and I didn't feel like...
Almost immediately into Leonard Cohen's dress rehearsal rag, we're thrown into the inner self-referential thoughts of our speaker, and there we stay through its entire run. Through some spare jetting chords and the musician's vocals, far more icy cold than usual, we endure the soft spiral which grows only more unsettling with each passing second. A prison from which our only escape is the song's conclusion. It is very likely Leonard Cohen's darkest song, one of the most unsettling I've ever heard at least. Yeah, one more for the road. Content warning for mentions of and discussions about suicide. Here's a timestamp. I thank you so much for your time.
Just take a look at your body now. There's nothing much to say.
The setting is some afternoon, like many others, and our speaker is hopelessly depressed. He prepares to shave his face, a common occurrence, but at this moment, he lies intimately, dangerously close to using the same razor for a different purpose.
That's right, it's come to this. Yes, it's come.
And through Cohen's poetry, we're able to get a front row seat to these unsavory thoughts, peering in like a voyeur to this obscenity. This is likely the grimmest, most violent depiction of self-flagellation I've ever heard in music. Cohen constantly addresses himself through repeated deprecatory statements. You used to be so bright and young and hopeful, yet after a life full of misstep, after disappointments, after misstep, it's come to this, and you only have yourself to blame. Meanwhile, his guitar elbows its way through the mix, each chord hitting like a hammer to the skull.
I thought you were a racing man, oh, but you couldn't take the pace.
What gets me most about this song, though, is just how stunningly casual it is. I mean, yeah, it's intense, but it's also clearly not the first time he's had this conversation with himself. His suicidal ideations have, in a way, become like a friend to him, a companion twisted up in such toxic songs and dances from which he could only escape through the cold hand of death. And all this hits closer to home than maybe I'd like to admit.
And wasn't it a long way down?
It's been a pretty wild ride, holding the song Among Others by Cohen so close to my heart for about a decade, which is about the same span of time I myself have only deteriorated, have misstepped and disappointed myself repeatedly.
But you've used up all your coupons, except the one that seems.
What was once a song I loved indulging in as a temporary look into the artist's mind has now become a song to which I myself can, regrettably, relate. I'm not actually going to kill myself, I care way too much about too many people to do so. But also, it's a thought that I can only ever escape temporarily. That much is certain.
And then the cameras pan, the stand-in stunt man.
And just when we think that this utter distress is too much to bear, the bait and switch completes itself. This is not the final performance itself, but a mere dress rehearsal, the likes of which our speaker has come by before and will experience again, perhaps the next time he shaves. It's quite the bleak outlook on these things, but, well, I can't pretend it isn't rooted in some sick reality. And to look such a reality deep in its eye, to acknowledge its perpetual presence in the everyday like a continual battle of wits and strength to be bested again and again and again, that is a certain special kind of art, indeed. Alright, look, I admit, I don't tend to end these videos with nearly enough pleasant songs. I am a sad person, I know this. And yet, to quote my personal favorite album of this year, things just aren't as awful as they're seeming. Welcome to paradise. This song. If tracks like Black and the Twin Peaks theme have haunted me for decades, this does the same, but less like the brooding presence of a cold ghost and more like the warm embrace of a close friend. This simply makes me so happy in ways that few other songs have really accomplished. The Avalanche's Since I Left You is one of the seminal works of the sample-based genre of plunderphonics. There have certainly been notable plunderphonics works from before the year 2000, but it is in this album where a whole new vision is breathed into the scene. Organic moods and layers of melodies that instill an immediate summer vibe like no other. And the introductory title track captures this all in one singular slice of sonic magic. It's less of a song and more of a landscape, capturing the intoxication of the first day of summer to an absolute T. It's as nostalgic as it is unique, calm as it is euphoric, as definitive of a lush party time atmosphere as it is a warm night of solitude. It's so much in one song, so endlessly replayable, even after all these years. So lately with these subscriber specials, I found myself trying to tease out common themes and trends that have run through this lineup. This time in particular, I found myself coming back to the theme of self-expression, the importance of art and music to profess one's hidden creative voice in ways by which mere words fall short. It's one big reason why I love music so damn much. The potential for this kind of greatness is vast and limitless. And Avalanches have further proved this by injecting a new life into these pre-existing samples, in the process creating something new with these pieces. These sample sources are all quite disparate, drawing from a number of musical traditions that have very little in common at the core of things. And yet, by giving each element its own little corner of the world, this song absolutely shines. It was clearly cobbled together with love, overflowing with the life that could only ever come from real human instinct. And it's a song about rebirth even. Certainly in the reworking of these sample sources, the main attraction sample at its center alone gives us that motif of leaving behind that which ails us to start anew. But listening to this one now also compelled me to reflect on the kind of person I was 20 or 10 or 5 or 1 year ago even. I have changed and I will continue to change for however long I stick around. And as long as I can find these little bits of happiness to comfort me in the toughest of times, the world can continue to feel anew time and time again. Here's to this next trip around the sun. If it holds even a fraction of this song's magic, it will be quite the good one indeed. As always, thank you so much for sticking around with me. Take care, and I'll see you all next time.